taboo and twisted love, while Jennifer faces the harsh reality of her own downfall. Kenneth and JC entered their bedroom after a long night. JC, feeling tired, asked Kenneth for help with her dress. "Can you unzip me?" she asked softly. "Sure," Kenneth replied, gently pulling the zipper down. JC carefully took off her dress and hung it neatly on a hanger. Kenneth, meanwhile, struggled a bit with his tuxedo jacket. "Here, let me help you," JC offered, helping him remove his tie. "Thanks," Kenneth said, attempting to leave the room, but JC stepped in front of him. She stood there, wearing a simple blue outfit, smiling warmly at him. Kenneth couldn't help but notice her graceful presence, and his heart raced a little at the sight of her standing there. "Why don't you sit down?" JC said, gently guiding him to the edge of the bed. She knelt down and began to untie his shoes, looking up at him with a playful smile. Her soft touch on his feet was soothing. "Does that feel better?" she asked, glancing up at him. "Yeah, much better," he answered. She continued helping him, removing his shoes and socks, easing his tiredness with her gentle care. "Did you like Darlene's pedicure?" she asked, referring to a friendly chat they had earlier in the day. "Yeah, it was nice," Kenneth replied, feeling more at ease. JC stood up and began unbuttoning his shirt. She removed his cummerbund and chuckled. "I never understood the point of this thing," she said, hanging it up alongside his jacket. Kenneth, feeling a little embarrassed but also touched by her care, tried to keep his focus as JC helped him undress in the most respectful way. She ran her fingers gently along his chest, and despite his inner struggle, he appreciated her love and attention. "You're always so thoughtful," JC whispered, leaning in to give him a soft kiss on the cheek. Kenneth, feeling overwhelmed, gently pulled back. "JC, that's enough," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "You can't tell me what to do," she teased, but she smiled and let the moment pass, respecting his boundaries. Kenneth sat quietly, thankful for her tenderness and care, while they both shared a peaceful moment in each other's company, without any need for further words. Kenneth and JC sat quietly in the room, tension in the air. "You're not my father," JC said, her voice firm but calm. She leaned in and kissed him, but Kenneth hesitated, unsure of how to respond. His hands rested lightly on her waist, trying to maintain control of the situation. JC smiled, her excitement clear, but Kenneth struggled to keep his thoughts straight. He fumbled with her outfit, unfamiliar with how to handle it, but JC quickly stood up, removing it herself. She sat back down beside him, her expression soft and kind, as if she had let go of any concerns. Kenneth, feeling confused but drawn to her energy, tried to regain composure. JC leaned into him, resting her head on his chest. They shared a moment of quiet, but the intensity in the room remained. "Thank you for being here," JC whispered, her words gentle. Kenneth didn't know what to say, so he held her close, trying to offer comfort. They lay down side by side, and JC rolled over to face him, wrapping her arms around his neck. "This is nice," she said softly, a peaceful smile on her face. Kenneth nodded, agreeing with her, though his mind was still racing. He kissed her forehead and stroked her hair, focusing on the calmness of the moment. JC sighed contentedly, nestling into his embrace. Kenneth, unsure of how to proceed, kept his touches light and caring, trying to show affection without crossing any lines. They both stayed in each other's arms, enjoying the closeness. But Kenneth felt a weight on him. JC seemed happy, but he knew things had gone far enough. He kissed her cheek one last time and whispered, "Let's rest now." JC nodded, looking content as she snuggled into him, and they lay quietly together, their connection holding without the need for words. The moment passed, leaving them both with a sense of understanding and peace. Kenneth lay still, letting JC take the lead, allowing her to enjoy the moment, though his mind wandered elsewhere. JC was clearly excited as she moved closer, running her hands through his hair, her breath quickening. "Oh," she whispered softly, her hand resting gently on his chest. Kenneth could feel her hesitation, but she smiled, clearly curious about the connection they shared. "It's just different, you know," she said, her tone light, trying to make conversation. Kenneth responded with a calm, reassuring smile, trying to ease the tension. "Yeah, it's okay," he replied. JC nodded, but Kenneth could sense her nervousness. She seemed unsure, but they both remained respectful of each other's space. They shared a quiet moment, with JC resting her head against him, enjoying the comfort of being together. Kenneth chuckled at her playful nature as she teased him about being tired. "Are you sure you're done for the night?" she asked with a grin, lightening the mood. Kenneth sighed, feeling the comfort of her company as they both relaxed. "For now," he replied with a smile, letting the moment pass without any pressure. They talked for a little while longer, sharing a few more quiet words before JC kissed his cheek, settling down beside him. She curled up on his chest, finding warmth in their closeness. "I love you," she whispered softly, and Kenneth gently hugged her, feeling at peace in the quiet of the night. "I love you too," he said, his voice warm and sincere as they lay in each other's company, content with the simple bond they shared. They let the night fall around them, the tension fading, replaced with a quiet understanding and care. Kenneth was caught off guard by JC's sudden comment. "Are you trying to push up against me?" she asked, her voice light and playful. "What?" Kenneth responded, confused. She giggled and shifted slightly. Kenneth, flustered, felt the tension but didn't know how to respond. Suddenly things shifted and he found himself in an awkward situation. His face turned red, embarrassed by what had just happened. JC leaned in close, her voice gentle but serious. "You don't have to worry about anything. We're together, and that's what matters." Kenneth, overwhelmed by the moment, tried to stay calm. "We should take a step back," he suggested, trying to collect his thoughts. JC moved closer, her tone soft and affectionate. "I trust you, completely," she whispered, making it clear that she cared deeply for him. Kenneth hesitated but appreciated her words. "Maybe we should just focus on enjoying the moment," he said gently. JC smiled, leaning her head against him. "That's all I want, to be close to you." Kenneth, relieved that the conversation had shifted to something more meaningful, held her quietly, enjoying the peace between them. They shared a moment of quiet reflection, knowing that they didn't need to rush anything. As they lay side by side, JC looked at him with a smile. "I just want to be with you," she said softly. Kenneth smiled back, thankful for the warmth in her words. "And I'm here," he reassured her. In a different part of the house, Jennifer stirred awake. She felt disoriented, noticing she wasn't in her own room. The bed felt strange, there was no mattress pad, and the sheets smelled stale. The ceiling fan above her spun loudly, adding to her discomfort. She tasted something unpleasant in her mouth and frowned, trying to recall what had happened. She was relieved, though, to realize it was Sunday, and she didn't have to go into work at the bargain bin. Despite her confusion, she was thankful for the quiet day ahead. Mary and Grace believed that Sundays should be about going to church and then spending time with family. Jennifer tried to pull up the torn blanket and realized that someone was still in bed with her. "What time is it?" a male voice groaned. "Time for you to get us some coffee," Jennifer answered. "Really? It's 5 o'clock? How about you get your own coffee?" Michael replied as he curled up in a ball, pulling the blanket with him. Jennifer got out of bed, found the bathroom, and after taking care of herself, discovered a small bottle of mouthwash. The bathroom looked just like the bedroom, run down and messy, definitely not inviting for a guest. Not wanting to crawl back into that uncomfortable bed, Jennifer decided to make coffee for herself. Without any clothes, she walked into the kitchen and screamed when the lights came on and cockroaches ran everywhere. She figured it was best not to touch anything in the kitchen or the dirty living room and decided that, no matter the time, her host needed to wake up, get dressed, and take her home. Her home with her mother might not be the coziest, but at least it was clean. Michael Green was not a morning person and almost reacted angrily when Jennifer loudly urged him to get dressed and drive her home. "Do it!" she insisted, showing her frustration. "I need a good reason to stay." He didn't respond. When he finally arrived at Jennifer's apartment complex, he was calm enough to ask if she had plans the next Friday. "Yeah, probably doing something with someone who knows what they're doing," Jennifer said as she opened the door to his old car. "You know, if you clean up a bit, you might actually get a second date," Jennifer said, slamming the door behind her. It was tough for Kenneth and JC to focus during the early morning service. They kept stealing glances at each other and playfully poking one another. When the deacon said, "Mass is ended, go in peace to love and serve one another," Kenneth and JC quickly made their way to the side door. "You look great. That color really suits you," JC said as she fiddled with his shirt button. "I think you're being a bit biased," he smiled as he got into the car. "So where do you want to go?" JC asked while starting the car. "Home," Kenneth replied. "I want to go home, crawl into bed and relax." "Aren't you hungry?" JC asked, smiling. "I'm starving." "Okay, is Delphi still open?" Kenneth asked. "Yeah, and they have a great breakfast buffet," JC replied with a smile. The waitress seated them, took their drink orders, and let them enjoy the buffet. "I really like the French toast sticks," JC said as she picked one up, dipped it into the blueberry sauce, and took a bite with a playful grin. Kenneth watched as she ate with enthusiasm. JC smiled at him and licked her lips before taking another bite, enjoying the taste. "Almost as much as I like the sausage links," she joked, and pointed to the food. "Oh," Kenneth said, feeling a bit distracted by her energy. "Daddy, you're not eating," she said. "Aren't you hungry?" "Starving," Kenneth admitted, looking down at his plate as he started to eat. "Slow down," she whispered. "I like my man to take his time." Kenneth noticed her as she walked around the buffet, getting more food. "They have cinnamon rolls now," JC said, returning to the table. "Oh, nice, but I should probably avoid those." Kenneth began, then stopped when he saw her spreading cream cheese frosting on her lips. She looked at him and playfully licked the frosting off. "Yeah, I think I'll stick to protein for now," JC said, taking a bite of the cinnamon roll. Kenneth took a moment to sip his coffee, waiting for his mind to clear before he could get up to the omelet stand. "Cheese, tomatoes, green peppers, mushrooms, and cubed ham," he told the young woman there. She smiled and began to prepare his omelet. She slid the hot omelet onto a plate and smiled when Kenneth thanked her. JC looked at his plate and then back at the omelet stand. "I'm almost too full," she admitted, "but that looks really good." It is. She uses a nice aged cheddar," Kenneth said as he took another bite of his omelet. "Kenneth? Kenneth K?" a man's voice called out, and Kenneth looked up. "Kenneth, how are you doing?" Ray Toops asked as he reached out to shake Kenneth's hand. Kenneth said, trying to remember where he had seen that face before. Ray Toops. I lived right next door to you and Jennifer and your 3 daughters on Hermosa," Ray said. "Ray, wow, it's great to see you." Kenneth smiled. "And don't tell me this lovely young woman is little JC," Ray continued. "Yes, unfortunately that's the truth. We're getting older, huh?" Kenneth replied. "That's definitely true." Ray agreed, unable to take his eyes off JC as she moved away. "I'm going to get an omelet," JC announced. "Wow, you must have a lot of boys trying to get her attention," Ray joked, still watching JC walk away. "Hey, Ray, that's my daughter. Keep your eyes to yourself, okay?" Kenneth said more firmly than he meant to. "Sorry, Kenneth. You're right. That was disrespectful of me," Ray said, apologizing. "By the way, is your house okay?" Kenneth asked, noticing Ray's expression change. "Look, Kenneth, I'm sorry, okay? I mean, JC is very pretty, but—" Ray stammered. "What do you mean?" Kenneth asked, confused. "You shouldn't be making threats," Ray said, getting more irritated. "I wasn't threatening anyone. I was just checking if your house was okay after I had that fire, that's all," Kenneth replied, equally upset. "We can leave as soon as I finish eating," JC said, putting her plate down. Melissa and Jennifer had lunch in silence. Melissa was quiet because she had nothing to say, and Jennifer was quiet because of a bad headache. Jennifer slowly stood, loaded the dirty dishes into the small dishwasher, and closed the door firmly. "I heard from Timmy the other day," Melissa finally said. "Who?" Jennifer asked, grabbing a beer from the small fridge. "Timmy Walker? He used to live 3 doors down," Melissa reminded her. "Back when we were at Cambridge Court." "This beer is warm. How long has it been here?" Jennifer said, tasting the fizzy drink. "Oh no, is this thing broken again?" Melissa exclaimed, yanking the fridge door open. "This is just great." She fiddled with the knobs for a moment and sighed when the fan finally turned on. "Anyway, back to what I was saying," Melissa continued. "Mom, I didn't live with you when you were at Cambridge Court," Jennifer reminded her. "Oh, right. You and Kenneth had already gotten that house by then. He looked great at the wedding, didn't he? Melissa chatted on. Yes, Mom. Kenneth looked good at the wedding. It was wonderful to see him, and I can't wait to see him again, Jennifer said, losing her patience. Anyway, as I was saying, I talked to Timmy the other day. Sadie, his wife, she passed away about 2 years ago, Melissa said, looking at her upset daughter. And? Really? Jennifer said, still annoyed about Melissa talking about Kenneth. He invited me to Arizona, you know. He has a condo and he's all by himself out there, Melissa replied. Wait, what? Jennifer interrupted. I told him I'd come and stay for a couple of weeks to see if I like it. When he lived next door, we hung out sometimes. He's not great in some ways, but he has other talents, Melissa said quickly. Are you moving? Jennifer asked. Yeah, by the end of the month, you'll need to find your own place. This is Section 8 housing, and I'm not really supposed to have anyone here, but they never check, Melissa explained. Great, just wonderful. What else is going to happen? Jennifer mumbled, sounding upset. On 3, JC said. 1, 2, 3. Both she and Kenneth shouted, Go Saints! She giggled and held onto his arms tightly. Why did you decide to do that? Kenneth asked, touching her smooth skin. I saw you liked it, she said, turning for a kiss. What do you mean? Kenneth asked, confused. The pictures? JC added. I noticed they were a bit mixed up and the top ones were of Jadia showing off. Oh, Kenneth replied, feeling shy. Daddy, that's why she took those pictures, JC said softly. She wanted you to see them. Well, Kenneth started but didn't finish. So I decided to go for it too, JC said, opening up a bit for him. When Darlene took off the first wax strip, I thought, I'm not doing this for just a few pictures. He better appreciate this. And? Kenneth asked. She looked surprised but happy. You're doing really well. I feel a bit silly, to be honest, she said, curling back in for another kiss. Need anything? She asked him. Got everything I could want right here, he said, giving her a warm squeeze. I meant like a drink or something. Oh, I have some microwave popcorn. I have butter, pepper, and Parmesan. What do you want? That does sound pretty good, he agreed. She hopped off the couch and went to the kitchen cheerfully. Want a glass for your drink? She called out. No, I'm good with just the can, Kenneth answered. After a few drinks and a bowl of popcorn, JC turned around in her father's arms and looked into his bright blue eyes. Listen, Rain. She's really pretty, with long hair and a nice smile, JC said. Good, Kenneth smiled. At least I won't have to deal with someone I don't like. And if you even think about looking at her? I swear I will hurt you, JC said with a serious tone. What? Kenneth laughed in response. I'm serious, JC insisted. If you ever betray me like my mother did to you, I wouldn't handle it well. She kissed him passionately and pressed closer to him. I remember the day you found out about my mother. It seemed like part of you just went away then, JC continued, holding tightly onto Kenneth. She kissed him again and moved against him playfully. I'm yours, always, she whispered earnestly. And you're mine, she breathed as they shared a close moment. Until the end, she said softly, feeling the connection between them deepen. Jennifer stared at the apartment listings online, feeling frustrated. $8 an hour, 40 hours a week, and after taxes there wasn't much left. Didn't you say that girl needed a roommate? Melissa asked, noticing Jennifer's sigh. Mindy, Mom, she's not straight, Jennifer said, turning to look at Melissa. So what? Did she say you had to share a bed with her? Melissa questioned. Well, not exactly, but... Jennifer replied. I'm leaving my bed in this dresser here, Melissa said, glancing around the small apartment. Honestly, the only thing I'm taking is that TV, Melissa added. And your car? Jennifer suddenly remembered. Of course, how else am I supposed to get around? Melissa said. Great, Jennifer muttered, feeling annoyed. Sorry if my plans are making things hard for you, Melissa said. Jennifer felt scared about living with Mindy. It wasn't because of her preferences, it was more about her strict beliefs. Jennifer worried that living with Mindy would mean giving up her carefree lifestyle. But now, realizing she had no car and nowhere to go, her choices were becoming limited. Hello? She suddenly heard Mindy's voice. Mindy? It's Jennifer, she said, sighing into the phone. Hey, Jen, what's up? Mindy answered cheerfully, Amber and I are watching the Seahawks game. Oh no, football, Jennifer groaned, letting the nickname slide. Hey now, easy there, Mindy joked. Football is great. So if I moved in with you, I'd have to watch that, huh? Jennifer asked, feeling a bit better. Mindy didn't sound extreme, she sounded fun. No way, Mindy laughed. You can always go to your room and watch something else. Are you really thinking of moving in with me? Yeah, I am, Jennifer finally admitted. Oh, that's awesome, Mindy replied with excitement. Amber is really being a pain. Jennifer heard someone call out, Hey! Do you want to come over and see my place? Mindy asked. Sure, Jennifer replied, smiling after Mindy shared her address. Mindy lived just around the corner from Hermosa Street. Anne hugged her new husband closely as they watched Robbie and Sammy on the carousel. This is so nice, Anne sighed while Eric cheered for the boys. No, he said with a smile and kissed her. Last night was nice. Really? She giggled. Did you enjoy it? I loved it, he said. He kissed her again. And I love you, Anne Green, he added. Remember, it's just Anne, she corrected him. Sorry, I've been calling you that for a while now. I bet you'd say it's too long, she teased. I'll be calling you Anne for the rest of my life, he promised. Daddy, look, Sammy called out. People at Disney World mostly didn't notice the couple as they walked with their 2 young sons. Rain watched Kenneth get ready to paint the area. At first, she was hesitant to hire Kenneth. He was much older than her. Also, he had a troubled past, and she had invested a lot in her equipment. But after JC kept insisting, she agreed to talk to him. During the interview, Kenneth was quiet and focused. Rain was proud of her skill in reading people's expressions, but she couldn't figure out what Kenneth was thinking. When she asked if he would have a problem taking orders from a woman, he smiled and replied, Only if you have a problem giving orders to a man. He was not afraid of hard work or heavy lifting, and long hours didn't bother him. The only thing Rain noticed was that Kenneth was very quiet and kept to himself. He never spoke about his life or JC. Whenever she tried to talk, he would answer but not share anything else. Okay, Rain smiled as she turned on the air compressor. Is Primer already in there? Kenneth asked, pointing to the cans. Oops, Rain smiled. She grinned wider. I was just checking to see if you were paying attention. Yes, you caught that, she lied. So, how did I do? He asked. Great. You did really well, Rain laughed as she turned off the machine. He opened one of the cans, carefully poured it into the machine, and stepped back. He gave her a small nod, and she turned the machine back on. Kenneth liked the steady hum of the machine while he painted the walls. When it was running, Rain didn't talk much. He liked his boss, but didn't agree with JC's opinion that Rain was attractive. To him, her constant talking was distracting. When the compressor was running, she usually quieted down, which let him think. That morning at breakfast, JC had teased him by spilling syrup on herself and then playfully licking it off while looking into his eyes. She giggled when Kenneth tried to reach for her, and they shared a light-hearted moment. Why did you do that? She joked with a smile as he pulled away. You know why? He laughed as he playfully tapped her on the back. Hey, she said, surprised. Instead of moving away, she leaned in closer. Do it again, she challenged him. Like this? He asked, giving her another light tap. Wow, she reacted and playfully moved her hand. Is this what you mean? He teased and gave her a slightly stronger tap. Oh, she again responded with laughter. Harder? He asked, giving her a firmer but playful tap. Wow, she exclaimed as laughter filled the air. She said they could have more fun later that evening. As he finished painting, he couldn't help but feel a little excitement. Okay, this is a strange one, Rain commented as the noise of the compressor stopped. Kenneth looked at the paint samples Rain showed him, gave a small shrug, and said, Sure, it looked nice in the store, before he went back to cleaning up. While he worked, Rain continued chatting away about music bands he didn't know, and people he wasn't interested in. Oh, come on, you must know her, Rain insisted. She was in that movie with that famous actor who passed away. It'll take about an hour before the primer is dry enough, Kenneth reminded him. Lunchtime? Yeah, okay, Rain said. Going to Clark's. Want anything from there? Kenneth asked. Nope. I brought my own. You should do that too. It saves a lot of money, Rain replied. Kenneth got into the pickup truck that JC had bought for him and drove 4 blocks to the drive-in diner. Hey, Daddy, Terry teased as she skidded to a stop in front of his window. Terry, why don't you have a daddy of your own? Kenneth asked, smiling. All the good ones are taken, she said, leaning close enough for him to notice her bubblegum breath. I'll take a chili burger with grilled onions and a large chocolate malt, Kenneth ordered, smiling as she skated away. Anytime you want to be my daddy, just let me know, she said while bringing him the food. Uh-huh. And what did JC tell you? Kenneth smiled as he paid her. She'd be mad for sure, Terry said with a laugh as she skated to the next car. Come on, Michael, not this place again, Jennifer complained as Michael Green pulled up. What? The food here is good. Better than McDonald's, right? Michael protested. Oh, please. You just want to see the girls in their shorts, Jennifer said, rolling her eyes. She had tried living with Mindy, who was nice enough. Jennifer was relieved to see that Mindy sometimes drank beer and didn't mind if Jennifer had one too. Really, what's a football game without a couple of cold ones? Mindy would laugh. But Jennifer felt uncomfortable around Ingrid, Mindy's partner, and struggled when she heard them together. The last straw had come when the girl from upstairs made a move on Jennifer. I'm not interested, Jennifer said, annoyed. Well, excuse me, the girl had replied. I just thought, since you live with Mindy, maybe you were into that. Then, to Jennifer's surprise, she saw Michael coming from the apartment office. You? You're going to live here? She asked, surprised. I wish, beautiful lady, Michael said, smiling. Michael didn't remember Jennifer, so he used his usual greeting for women he didn't know. No, they only have a couple of 2-bedroom places, Michael continued. I can't afford that, you know. So, you need a roommate? Jennifer asked. Hey, that's a great idea, Michael replied, looking pleased. He signed a 1-year lease and he and Jennifer moved in together. The agreement was that she would pay $300 a month, share half of the utility bills, and keep the apartment tidy. I remember your last place, right? She said tightly. Michael didn't recall, but he wisely stayed quiet. Michael smiled as he watched Terry skating over. Wow, she's impressive, huh? Michael said. Then he remembered something and turned to Jennifer. Hey, will you be okay eating here? He asked. Yeah, I'm fine. I don't know what I had this morning, Jennifer admitted. I'll manage. They placed their order and then playfully argued about whose turn it was to pay. No, remember the last time? It was just days before payday? Michael said. Oh yeah, you're right, Jennifer said. Yes, Michael smiled, making a gesture with his finger. That's one for me, and how many for you? That would be none. Elizabeth smiled at JC as she walked in from lunch, but then did a double take. She looked around the lobby to ensure they were alone. JC, can I ask you something? Elizabeth said, leaning closer. Yes, ma'am, is something wrong? JC replied in her small voice. Depends on how you feel about it, I guess, Elizabeth smiled. So, are you expecting a baby? JC covered her mouth, eyes wide in surprise. You can tell? She whispered in shock. Sweetheart, you've got that special glow about you, Elizabeth laughed. So, how far along are you? About 2.5 months, give or take, JC said nervously. As JC figured, it happened the night of her sister's wedding. Her periods had always been regular, so when she missed her first one, she knew. But she was scared to tell her father, unsure of how he would react. He had received the good news 3 times before, but those were not true. So is this good news? Elizabeth asked with a smile. Yes, ma'am, the best ever, JC whispered. At least I hope so. Then congratulations, Elizabeth smiled as she gathered her mail to leave. Thank you, JC whispered, feeling a wave of anxiety. She hoped her father would be happy. She hoped he would love her even more. At the sheriff's office, Elise answered the phone. Eric Green, please, Anne said. Yes, ma'am. May I ask who's calling? Elise asked. His wife, Anne replied cheerfully. Eric, Anne's on line 2 for you, Elise said into her intercom. Hey, honey, what's up? Eric asked. Are you sitting down? Anne asked, bubbling with excitement. Of course, that's all we do here, Eric joked. Well, guess what, Daddy? Anne said. I'm not sure, Eric replied. Well, Daddy, when we were together, we kind of made a baby, Anne said, and then burst into joyful laughter. Oh my goodness, You must be kidding me, Eric said, surprised. Yes, oh my, do you think it might be a little girl? Oh, I love you so much, Anne excitedly said. I think he got the call, Sheriff Dick Davis said, looking at Eric, who was holding the phone and seemed dazed. Anne's voice could be heard chatting away. Officer Eric Green, Dick shouted. Huh? Oh, hey, that's great, but I have to go, Eric replied, quickly hanging up. So, let me guess, we're going to be parents, huh? Dick asked. Yes, sir, Eric said before fainting. Wow, we should have recorded that, Orville said. Already did, Dick laughed, pointing to the video camera on the desk. Oh, no, you didn't, Orville giggled. He is never going to live this down. Kenneth walked into the living room, sipping the last of his chocolate malt. Rain was on the phone with one of her many friends. Yeah, my cramps are terrible. This headache feels like it could explode. And you know what paint fumes do, right? Rain complained. She noticed Kenneth and blushed, realizing he heard her talking. Oops, gotta go. Time to get to work. Love you, bye, Rain quickly said, hanging up. Hey, how was lunch? She asked. Great. I had a chili burger with grilled onions. It was amazing, Kenneth said excitedly. You should tell them to add cheddar cheese next time, Rain suggested, starting to pour paint. Oh, that sounds good, Kenneth replied. He double-checked the preparations and nodded. Rain turned on the compressor, and Kenneth began applying the first coat of paint. The paint was an unattractive greenish yellow. It was quite unpleasant. He painted carefully, focusing on doing a good job, even as a thought kept nagging at him. JC hadn't had her period in at least 2 months. He was sure of that. He didn't know when her last period had been since he had been away, but he knew she hadn't had one since he returned home. Wow, that color is really ugly, Rain said, pulling Kenneth back to reality. He smiled. Her chatter was a welcome distraction as he was feeling a bit overwhelmed. Maybe it will look better when we put on the main color, Kenneth suggested. I doubt it. Sand is pretty neutral, Rain replied with a shrug. Well, I just have to put it on the wall. I won't be living here, she said. Kenneth remembered that JC had been inexperienced. He was certain of that from their first night together. Her pain had been real. The blood had been real. Kenneth smiled as he painted the accent wall, making sure to fill all the spaces neatly. Okay, he called out, and Rain turned off the compressor. Wow, that looks great, Rain started, but stopped when the customer came in to check on the progress. Oh, isn't that lovely? The woman said, admiring the wall. Aim to please, Kenneth replied with a grin. Oh, I'm almost tempted to paint all the walls like this, the woman exclaimed. We can do that, Kenneth said. But let's see how it looks with the other color first. You've already paid for it, and we can't return it, so we might as well, right? You're right, the woman agreed. Rain thought about giving Kenneth a little extra money in his paycheck this week. Grace smiled as she watched Jennifer work, making sure to keep her distance. Mindy had told Jennifer there were no hard feelings, especially since Ingrid had come out to her parents and moved in with Mindy. As a manager, Grace appreciated when employees showed initiative. As a friend, she tried a few times to connect with Jennifer, but Jennifer had turned her down. I wonder if she thinks I'm not straight too, Grace wondered, then shrugged. Hi, welcome to the bargain bin. Can I help you find something? Grace heard Jennifer say to a customer. This one needs jeans, the tired mother said, pointing to a quiet girl. Right this way, Jennifer replied. We have juniors, right? No, maternity jeans, the woman complained, clearly frustrated with the girl. Oh, Jennifer said, noticing the girl's slightly rounded belly. Her face went pale. Oh no, Jennifer whispered. That's what I thought too, the woman snapped at the girl. Kenneth found a nice vase, and the woman behind the counter at Annie's helped him arrange some lovely red roses for JC. And we have these cards right here, Lily said, smiling. Kenneth picked a simple white card with gold trim. Special occasion? Lily asked as she rang it up. Yeah, we're having a baby, Kenneth replied. Lily tried not to look surprised. He seemed to be in his 50s. Well, congratulations, she said cheerfully. We are too. She lightly touched her flat stomach. Twins, actually, she laughed. And funny enough, our first two are twins too, but no one in our family has twins. That's interesting, isn't it? What are the chances? Kenneth said, not really paying much attention. The cashier at Early's grocery shook her head when he placed a bottle of non-alcoholic champagne on the counter. "That stuff tastes terrible," she said. "Wait." She stepped out from behind the counter and hurried toward an aisle. "Here, I assume you're celebrating something special, right?" "This tastes much better and it makes the same pop and fizz," the cashier said, placing a bottle of sparkling grape juice on the counter. "Yes, ma'am. We're celebrating something big," Kenneth agreed. JC opened the door and smiled. Daddy was already home and was clearly making dinner. She could smell steak, one of the few meals he cooked very well. "Go change out of your work clothes," Kenneth called to her before she could even step into the kitchen. "Yes, sir," she teased, heading to their bedroom. She had a couple of cute nighties and some comfy outfits, but Daddy said the most charming thing she had was her old shirt and plain white underwear, so that was what she chose first. Then, she slipped on her new bunny slippers. Daddy had bought them for her with his first paycheck, and she loved them. "Hi, baby," Kenneth smiled as he set the table. "Hi, Daddy," she said, hugging him tightly for a warm embrace. "Sit down. The steaks are almost ready," he smiled, gently placing his hand on her back. "I can't sit while you're doing that," she said playfully, leaning against him. "Oh, do you want me to stop?" he asked, leaning in for another kiss. "No," she giggled. "Too bad, I'm hungry," he smiled, giving her a light tap before pulling the steaks out of the oven and putting them on plates. "Ouch, Daddy," she laughed, rubbing her back. "That stung." "It did not. It was just a little love tap," he said playfully. "Need a kiss to make it better?" "Yes," she replied, smiling as she adjusted her clothes. "Later, baby, later," he chuckled and guided her to her seat. They enjoyed their meal in comfortable silence, but they often reached out to touch each other or squeeze hands. "That was delicious," JC said after finishing her steak. "How about we head to the living room for some champagne?" Kenneth suggested. "Oh boy, champagne!" JC exclaimed, smiling. "What are we celebrating?" "I think you know," Kenneth replied, stepping back to let her go into the living room first. On the coffee table next to the vase of red roses was a silver baby rattle. "Oh," JC sighed, gazing at the roses and the rattle. "JC, you make me the happiest man in the world," Kenneth said softly, placing his hands on her shoulders. "And you make me the happiest woman in the world," JC whispered, wrapping her arms around him tightly. "How many girls get to be with their dream man every night?" She pulled back slightly to look into his eyes. They shared a warm kiss until he gently pulled back to lift her shirt over her head. "Hey, you said we would have some sparkling juice," she laughed as he leaned down to kiss her. "Oh, right, I did, didn't I?" he replied, grabbing the bottle of sparkling grape juice from the ice bucket. "That's not what you promised." She laughed again. "And juice is better for our baby," Kenneth smiled, opening the bottle and pouring her a glass. "To our love, which has brought us our first baby," she said, raising her glass. "To our love," he echoed, tapping his glass against hers. She finished her drink, placed the empty glass on the table, and took in the sweet scent of the roses nearby. "Thank you, Dad," she whispered softly. She nestled her head against him. "I was a little worried you might be upset," she confessed. "Why would I be upset?" he asked, lifting her chin to meet her gaze. "Because," she said quietly, "my mom told you she was having a baby that wasn't yours, and I didn't want you to think I was just using you too." He kissed her gently, then a bit deeper, reassuring her with his affection. "You," she insisted. "You are not your mother. You are my partner." Michael felt confused about the situation. Jennifer stormed out of the store, her face filled with anger as she marched towards his car. "You've got to be kidding me!" she yelled as she opened his car door. "What happened?" he asked, surprised. "I'm going to have a baby!" she shouted at him. Michael stared at her, stunned. That's not so bad, is it?" he replied hesitantly. "What?" Jennifer shouted. "Are you serious? How can you say that?" "Well, I love you, and you love me, right?" Michael said. Jennifer looked at him in disbelief. "I was actually thinking about asking if you wanted to get married," Michael stammered. "We're doing well together." "You're joking, right?" Jennifer snapped, covering his mouth with her hand. Anne laughed as Eric placed his hand on her smooth belly. "A baby," He breathed in amazement. You know how babies are made, right? She teased, giving him a playful kiss. Of course, he replied confidently. You really do? She asked, her eyes wide. Sure, see? The dad. Eric started to explain. That's you. Anne pointed playfully at him. Yes, that's me. So the dad and mom work together to create a baby, he continued. And then what happens? Anne encouraged him. Well, then they make each other laugh and enjoy their time together, Eric said, giving her belly a gentle rub. I don't think that's how it goes, Anne giggled. I promise that's exactly how it happens, he replied, still smiling at her. Eric and Anne were lying together, the air light between them. Prove it, Anne said with a playful grin. About the baby? Eric asked, a bit concerned. The baby will be fine, Anne reassured him with a gentle kiss. Later, as they lay close, Anne snuggled up to him. You kind of left out the part where the mommy makes funny faces and screams, she whispered, teasing him. Eric chuckled. Yeah, well, the mommy's not supposed to do that. She's supposed to say, hurry up, my show's coming on. He gave her a light tap on the back and smiled. Now go get me a drink. Anne laughed. Get your own drink. I'm pregnant, remember? JC sat comfortably in Kenneth's lap, her back resting against his chest. She felt secure as they relaxed in the chair, but the moment became a little too intense for her. Okay, that's enough, JC said, lightly grabbing his hand and pulling it away, signaling she was ready to stop. Kenneth wrapped his arms around her and gave her a light, playful nibble on the shoulder. She caught her breath and whispered, You know, I thought you had other plans, referring to their earlier conversation. I never want to hurt you, Kenneth replied softly. JC held his arm, appreciating the care he showed. Jennifer was reaching the end of her patience. Michael, for the love of everything, just stop, she said, frustrated. She stomped into her bedroom, kicked off her shoes, and began to change when Michael timidly entered the room. Since we're having a baby, I thought maybe I could stay in here, you know. With you? He mumbled. Jennifer sighed, her anger simmering. Right now I just need space, she replied sharply. Michael, clearly realizing he had pushed too far, quietly left the room. The smell of bacon filled the air as JC woke up. She quickly slipped on her bunny slippers and bounced into the kitchen. You're up to no good, Kenneth teased as he saw her enter. What? JC asked, laughing. Running around like that, he said, grabbing her hand and giving her a playful spin. JC giggled. What did I do? Kenneth smiled, still holding her hand. Getting into trouble, that's what. JC grinned, but didn't press the conversation further. She enjoyed their playful morning moment, feeling light and carefree as they shared a peaceful breakfast. Are you trying to have a baby? With your dad's baby? It's been 20 years at least, JC said, taking deep breaths. All right, Kenneth replied and let go of her hands. She leaned over the back of her chair. Make it stronger, she urged him after he gave her a gentle slap. Jennifer sat up and stared at her computer screen. Unbelievable, she muttered, looking at the question again. What's up? Michael asked. Just be quiet for a minute, Michael. I need to think, Jennifer replied. Michael went back to watching the football game. It wasn't as enjoyable with the sound off, but at least Jennifer wasn't complaining. Of course, that meant she would find something else to complain about. I can't believe this, Jennifer shouted, hitting the desk with her fists. Hey, that's my mom's desk, you know, Michael said, showing some strength for once. Jennifer logged off the computer and marched into the kitchen. She grabbed a can of soda from the fridge. Can you get me one too? Michael asked. Jennifer didn't respond, instead walking back and forth, muttering quietly. Do you hear me? Michael asked, then heaved a sigh and stood up. He took a can for himself, went back to the living room and turned the TV sound back on. Can you turn that off, please? I'm trying to think, Jennifer insisted. No, Michael replied firmly. I'm tired of trying to please you. Nothing seems to make you happy, so I give up. After finishing her soda, she stomped into the living room and sat down next to him. We need to talk during the next break, Jennifer said sharply. Michael smiled as the game played on longer than usual before the next commercial. By the time they finally took a break, Jennifer looked ready to explode. As soon as the sound was off, she said, We have a problem. I'm listening, Michael said, still watching the screen. I was applying for a marriage license online for St. Elizabeth Parish, Jennifer explained. Okay, Michael said, preparing to silence the TV again as the ads ended. It asked for the date of my divorce, from Kenneth, Jennifer said, taking the remote from him. Listen to me. Focus. Right, so that was what, 10 years ago? Michael asked, finally giving her his full attention. No, Jennifer admitted. We are still married. Oh, Michael said, frowning slightly. Jennifer and Michael sat together, the conversation suddenly turning serious. So that means, Jennifer began. If we're going to get married, I need to get divorced first, Jennifer said, feeling uneasy. Michael shrugged. Okay, so let's get started on that. Now, hand me the remote. The game's back on. This is important, Michael, Jennifer said, her stomach turning. And I'm being serious, too. It's Sunday. Nothing we can do about it today, right? Michael replied, reaching for the remote. Give me the remote. Jennifer sighed and handed it to him. I'll be in the bedroom, she said, feeling frustrated. Yeah, I'll be there at halftime, Michael smirked, clearly more focused on the game. Please don't wake me up if I'm sleeping, all right? Jennifer asked, trying to avoid further tension. Michael realized she wasn't demanding, just quietly asking, which left him slightly taken aback. Anne and Robbie were having a light-hearted conversation about baby names. If it's a boy, we're naming him Eric Vincent Green Jr., Anne said firmly. I thought we were going to name him Aladdin, Robbie chimed in. That's from a movie, Anne laughed, hugging her son. But it's a good movie, Sammy added with enthusiasm. Yes, it is a good movie, but it's not the best name for a little boy, Eric said, smiling at his son. And if it's a girl, we're naming her Evie, after Daddy's initials, E.V., Anne continued, happy with the choice. But I thought we were going with Aladdin, Robbie argued again. Maybe for the next one, Eric teased. You're just saying that, Robbie pouted. Maybe, Eric grinned. After lunch, Anne snuggled up to Eric, resting her head on his shoulder. Did I tell you lately that I love you? She asked sweetly. Yeah, you say it all the time, Eric teased back. But actions speak louder than words. Oh, Anne smiled playfully. And what kind of action would prove it to you? Eric pretended to think. Not sure, can you think of anything? Let me see, how about a foot rub? A foot rub might do it, Eric laughed. Anne kicked off her shoes and stretched out her feet, laughing as they relaxed together, enjoying the quiet moment between them. Later, the two of them lay together on the couch, Anne resting against Eric's chest. The football game played softly in the background, but neither of them was paying much attention to it. They simply enjoyed the quiet comfort of being close, the gentle rhythm of their breathing matching as they shared the peaceful moment. As JC lay down on the couch, she caught Kenneth's attention completely. His hand gently touched her belly, noticing it was a bit bigger. Oh, did you feel that? She whispered softly. Feel what? Kenneth asked, leaning in to kiss her ear. The baby. I think she kicked, JC said with a warm smile, enjoying Kenneth's closeness. Really? Kenneth said, sounding a bit doubtful. He thought about their daughter Anne's Thanksgiving dinner, which they had missed to avoid drama. Anne had cooked for her mother and her mother's new boyfriend, and while she was proud, Kenneth knew the food had not turned out well. I told my mother I didn't like Jadia and wanted to be like Anne from now on. She was not happy. Anne had laughed. Knowing your mother, she would have found something else to be upset about, Kenneth said with a shrug, then took a big drink of beer to help get through the dry turkey. Are you sure it's the baby kicking? Kenneth asked again. Yep, JC replied with a smile. Let's check, he said, placing his hand on her belly, but the baby was still. The kid's already stubborn even before arriving, he joked lightly. They shared a laugh, enjoying their moment together. Meanwhile, Jennifer glanced at her computer screen, frustrated as she clicked on the link again. The earliest we can schedule the divorce hearing is in April, she said, feeling tears of frustration beginning to form. Then just schedule it, Michael replied. The baby is due in April, Michael, Jennifer reminded him. So, he said calmly, are you the first woman to get married after having a baby? Do you think getting a lawyer would speed things up? Jennifer wondered as she searched for affordable lawyers online. I bet that would help, Michael agreed. He came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her, and kissed her gently on the neck, making her feel at ease. "Hey, beautiful. Want to see if we can add to the family?" he whispered playfully in her ear. Jennifer hesitated, almost saying no, but then paused to think. "I bet you $1,000,000 you can't," she smiled back at him. "When you smile, you really are a beautiful lady," Michael said. "Kenneth K?" the man asked as soon as the air compressor stopped. "Yes," Kenneth replied. "No, are you Kenneth K?" the man asked again. "Yes, sir. How can I help you?" Kenneth responded. "Here you go. You've been served," the man said, stepping back while keeping a close watch on Kenneth. Is there a problem?" a worried Rain Sneed asked. "I'm not sure yet. I haven't looked at the papers," Kenneth said as he opened the large envelope. "Petition for dissolution of marriage," Kenneth read aloud. He paused for a moment, then shrugged and put the papers back in the envelope. "Would you look at that? She's finally filing for divorce," he said. "Don't let me forget this envelope when we leave, okay?" Rain nodded and started the air compressor again. As soon as Kenneth left for lunch at Clark's drive-in, Rain called JC. "Okay, thanks," JC said. "Thanks for letting me know." JC ended the call and quickly looked up the phone number for the lawyer used by Young Insurance. "Mr. Johnson?" JC asked the receptionist. Which one?" Polly, Jesse's new assistant, replied. "Whichever one does family law," JC answered. Polly hesitated, unsure if Jesse or Parker handled family law. "Just pick one," Polly finally suggested. "Jesse," JC said, trying to stay calm with the confused woman. "Jesse Johnson here," Jesse said sharply on the phone. "Mr. Johnson, my name is JC K, and I need to hire you for my father's divorce case," JC said firmly. "Well, Casey J, I'm not sure you can afford a lawyer," Jesse replied, thinking he was being friendly. "But why do you think your mommy and daddy are getting a divorce?" "Mr. Johnson, it's JC K, not Casey J, and I'm 21, not 2, JC snapped back. "Oh, I'm sorry," Jesse said, sounding a bit embarrassed. "My mother has filed for a petition to end their marriage after they haven't lived together for 10 years, JC continued. "Well, I should really talk to your father, not you," Jesse said. "Name the time and we'll be there," JC insisted. "I can see you at 4, Jesse offered. "Fine, Kenneth and JCK, JC said before hanging up. She then took her phone back out of her purse and pressed the button for Kenneth's number. Kenneth watched Terry glide by in her skates, legs in tights and arms covered by a long-sleeve shirt, and smiled. She looked really unhappy in the cold wind. "Same as usual?" she almost shouted into the car window. "Yeah, add," Kenneth replied. "Grilled onions, cheddar cheese," Terry said with a smile and drove away quickly. Kenneth took out his phone and smiled when he saw JC's name on the screen. "Hi, sweetheart," he said happily. "We have an appointment with Jesse Johnson at 4 o'clock this afternoon," JC said without wasting time. Okay, who's Jesse Johnson?" Kenneth asked. "He's the lawyer for your divorce," JC said sharply. Okay, how did you find out?" Kenneth started to ask. "From Rain," JC answered, still irritated. Sweetheart, why do you sound so upset?" Kenneth asked. "Because," JC shouted, "this is something important for both of us, and I hear it from someone else. We're a team, remember? If something happens, we should talk about it." "I was going to tell you when I got home," Kenneth replied. "You should have called me right away when you got those papers, not waited until you got home," JC yelled. "Miss K, is everything okay?" Elizabeth Baggett, JC's boss, asked. "Just that men can be really clueless and don't think," JC replied, her eyes full of anger. "That's true, but can you keep your voice down a little?" Elizabeth suggested. "Yes, ma'am," JC said. "Daddy, I'll pick you up at 3:45 at home and make sure you have those papers with you, okay?" JC added before hanging up abruptly. Terry came to a stop and Kenneth gave her a $10 bill. "Keep the change," he smiled as she reached for it. "Thanks, Daddy," Terry smiled back and looked around for any new cars to check out. Seeing none, she quickly skated back to the warmth of the building. Kenneth chuckled to himself. JC's little outburst didn't bother him at all. It showed him just how much she cared for him. He was 28 years older than her, yet she looked after him like a protective mother with her young. Jennifer felt excited. Her lawyer, Griffin Guillory, told her that Kenneth K had received the legal papers, What made her even happier was that Griffin had managed to schedule a mediation meeting for January 12th, not April 26th. "I bet he was shocked when he got those papers," she laughed on the phone. "Actually, no, he just took them and went right back to work," Griffin replied. "Oh, well, Jennifer said, considering this. "See you on the 12th unless something else comes up," Griffin said before hanging up. Jesse Johnson watched JC as she dressed in her nice maternity clothes, looking youthful and lively. He had to adjust himself to avoid feeling awkward. Kenneth K. didn't make much of an impression on Jesse. He looked like just another man, not particularly attractive and a bit younger than Jesse. He listened to Kenneth's situation, with JC interrupting at times, made some notes, then glanced at both of them. "Okay, so what do we want to do?" Jesse asked. "Just give her the divorce and nothing else," JC said, clearly upset. "Yeah, just the divorce and ensure she doesn't get anything else," Kenneth agreed. "According to my notes, there isn't anything else," Jesse replied. "I have a job paying $15 an hour. I guess she could try to claim." Kenneth started. "Mr. K, my fee is $3.85 an hour," Jesse interrupted. "If you'd prefer, I can suggest someone who charges less." "I'm paying for this. You'll get your money," JC insisted firmly. JC barely waited for the car to stop before she jumped out and rushed into the house. Kenneth turned off the engine, waited for the garage door to close, then followed her inside. "What in the world has got you so worked up?" Kenneth asked as he saw JC kicking off her shoes. "Do you still care about her?" JC asked sharply. "Care about who?" Kenneth replied, confused. "Her! Mom! Do you still care about her?" JC yelled. "No, actually, I'd been thinking about getting a divorce, even before I found out about everything else," Kenneth admitted. "Was she better than me?" JC asked, tears filling her eyes. "No, not at all," Kenneth said with a smile, trying to comfort her. "Did she treat you better than I do?" JC shouted, pushing him away. "No, she didn't even like being close," Kenneth confessed. "JC, please, why?" "Did you?" JC demanded, her anger evident. JC screamed in frustration, her emotions running high. "You won't even touch me, but I bet you were all over her, weren't you?" Kenneth laughed, trying to calm the situation. "Are you serious? She wouldn't let me do anything like that?" "Yeah, right," JC yelled, her face red and blotchy from crying. "I bet that's all you two did, but you won't even think about it with me." "It'll hurt," Kenneth said gently, trying to reason with her. "So what?" JC shot back. "Fine," Kenneth said reluctantly, "if that's what you really want." It did hurt. JC whimpered and groaned, but she refused to let Kenneth stop. The pain was overwhelming, but she was determined to see it through, despite her discomfort. She had read countless stories online, believing that it would be different, better, but now, all she could think about was the burning pain and how much she wanted it to be over. Kenneth, sensing her discomfort, tried to be careful, but it was clear JC was struggling. Eventually he stopped, pulling away and trying to comfort her. He stepped away for a moment, and JC heard the sound of running water. Soon, he returned with a warm cloth, gently cleaning her and offering her a small smile of reassurance. "How's that?" he asked softly. JC managed a weak smile, still trying to recover from the intense moment. "Now I'm really yours," she said. But Kenneth shook his head. "You've always been mine, and you always will be," he said firmly, showing her the care and love she needed. JC smiled back, knowing that he meant it, even if things hadn't gone as planned. She turned toward him, but then whispered, "I need to fix dinner." Kenneth grinned, playfully asking, "Who's in charge here, huh?" JC laughed and, deciding to relax, lay back. "You can take charge," she teased. They shared a peaceful moment afterward, both of them setting aside the tension from earlier, and the lightness returned to their conversation. Meanwhile, Jennifer sat in the doctor's office listening to him speak. His words seemed to blend together as he discussed her age and the risks associated with pregnancy at 49. "There's a higher chance of complications, including birth defects like Down syndrome." The doctor droned on. Jennifer felt dizzy, the weight of his words hitting her hard. But she stayed focused, holding herself together, trying to stay conscious through the overwhelming news. She looked at Michael, feeling scared. "What are we going to do?" she whispered quickly. We're going to get that test he mentioned, find out the facts, and go from there, Michael replied. Jennifer was surprised by how much Michael had changed. He seemed more responsible now, which she appreciated. He even helped clean the apartment sometimes. When the doctor was busy writing notes, he helped her get dressed and put on her coat. "So where to now?" he asked as they stepped into the cold January wind. "Work. Mike and Kasha are off today," Jennifer said after a moment. "Didn't Grace say you could take the whole day off?" Michael asked. "She did, but I feel bad leaving her short-handed," Jennifer replied. "Oh," was all Michael said as he started the car. He thought it was unusual for Jennifer to care about someone else's needs. "Okay, I'll pick you up at 9. He smiled and leaned over for a quick kiss. "Okay, see you at 9, she said. "Hey," Grace smiled when Jennifer walked in. "I thought you were." "Yeah, but with both Mike and Kasha off, I just didn't feel right not coming," Jennifer said, tying the bargain bin apron around her waist. "Hey, Rain," Kenneth said as he carefully painted the trim around the window. "Remember, I need next Tuesday off." "What? Oh, right, the divorce," Rain replied, finishing the door she was working on. "Yeah," Kenneth said, stepping back to look at his work. As the date approached, JC became more demanding. Kenneth often felt more tired in the morning than he had the night before. "Why?" he asked her last night when she insisted on something he wasn't comfortable with. "Has any other girl done this?" she asked. "No, I told you that," he replied. "So no one but me, right?" she asked again. "Right, no one but you," he confirmed. "And only me," she added, as if that explained everything. "This looks nice," Rain said, admiring the white trim. Kenneth looked around too, nodding in agreement. The soft pink walls complemented the white trim nicely. The ceiling matched the trim, and under the paper he had laid out, the carpet was a light baby blue. "Yeah, it goes well with the carpet," he agreed. "It's going to be a baby room," Rain said as she finished the closet door. "Would have been my first guess," Kenneth replied. JC wouldn't tell him if it was a boy or a girl. She knew after the doctor did an ultrasound, but she kept that information to herself. They had decided on Emily Ann if it was a girl, and Kenneth Jr. if it was a boy. Kenneth had hesitated a little about naming the baby after him. "Kenneth's the best name ever," JC said. "If it's a boy, we wouldn't choose any other name." "Wonder what color we should paint the baby's room at my place?" Kenneth asked, hoping Rain would mention if JC had shared anything. "Not sure," Rain smiled. JC looked around to see if anyone was nearby and then let out a loud sound. Elizabeth had brought takeout from Manny's Mexican, and JC couldn't resist the refried beans. Now, later in the day, she was feeling the effects. Anyone who passed by her area was in for a surprise. "Excuse me," JC laughed to herself. "Wow, don't pull your finger, all right." Grant Johnson chuckled as he entered while heading to a meeting. "I said excuse me," JC replied. "As if that fixes things." Grant smiled, buttoning his coat. "Well, not really, but—" JC giggled. "When my wife Kaylee is pregnant, it's 9 long months of the worst smells. The government would think it was chemical warfare," Grant joked as he opened the door to his office. "Brah!" JC squeaked as the cold air hit her bare legs. Elizabeth walked in, wrapping her arms around herself to stay warm, and checked her mail. "Oh, Elizabeth," JC said. "Next Tuesday?" "Yes, JC, I know you need next Tuesday off for court," Elizabeth replied, tapping her envelopes on her palm, then tossed a sales catalog into the trash. "Ooh, what's that?" JC asked, pointing at the trash can. "Just stuff I don't need but might want later," Elizabeth said with a smile as she stepped out of the room. Curious, JC pulled Elizabeth's catalog from the trash and flipped through it quickly. "Oh, I bet Daddy would like that," JC said to herself, noticing a pretty set of clothing. Once more, she looked around and made another loud sound. "Excuse me," JC said again. After that, JC checked the website's address and ordered 3 sets in white, black, and red, clicking yes for matching stockings. Mary Kowalski drove aimlessly. Her mother and mother-in-law had urged her to get out of the house and take a break from caring for her 3 children for a little while. Neither of them seemed to understand. It wasn't just stress for her. It was an expression of love. A doctor in Missouri had told Mary that she might never have children. One of her fallopian tubes was not working well, and there was minimal scarring on her uterine walls. but Thomas Kowalski Jr. and George Jonathan Kowalski were living proof that only God knows if a woman is meant to be a mother, not the doctors. Feeling bored, she decided to stop by the bargain bin store. Maybe Grace or Mindy would have a moment to chat. As Jennifer walked in, a wave of worry washed over her. The bitter cold outside kept most people at home, warm and cozy. She looked around. Mindy was in the stockroom, sorting through a shipment of jeans, while Grace helped a father and son. The son was preparing for his first date, and the father was looking for a suitable outfit. Then Jennifer remembered the baby in her belly. The doctor had been very clear. At her age, having a baby could be risky for both mother and child. "Mary?" Jennifer asked, hurrying over, trying not to lose her courage. "Oh, hi, Jennifer. How's it going?" Mary greeted her with a warm smile. Jennifer felt a strong connection to the woman. "Mary, can I talk to you for a moment?" Jennifer asked, her voice desperate. Sure," Mary replied, noticing Jennifer's anxious look. Mary felt a bit uneasy with Jennifer's urgent tone. "Mary, I'm pregnant, and I visited the doctor today. He mentioned a lot about possible issues because of my age. Can you please pray for me?" Jennifer pleaded. "Of course I will," Mary assured her. "Right now?" Jennifer asked, grabbing onto a rack and gently kneeling down. Oh, okay, I suppose," Mary stammered. "Please let your hands be on my belly. The doctor hasn't confirmed it, but I'm sure it's a girl," Jennifer said, feeling excited. "Jennifer, I'm not a—" Mary started to say. "But you are," Jennifer insisted. "I believe you can help my baby." Mary looked around, unsure if this was a prank, but when she saw Jennifer's joyful tears and glowing face, she felt moved. "God, your will, not mine, be done," Mary said softly, and knelt beside Jennifer. Kenneth laughed loudly as he left the kitchen. "I said, excuse me?" JC protested. "Oh, you're excused. That noise? That's something else." Kenneth chuckled. "Sorry, I had beans for lunch, not the best choice," JC giggled. "Let's get a fan to clear the air, shall we?" Kenneth joked. "Dinner's ready," JC said, ignoring his earlier comment. "Are you really going to do that while we're eating?" Kenneth asked, still staying out of the kitchen. "Probably," JC replied playfully. "Then I'm eating in here," Kenneth said. "Please don't," JC urged. "It's important for the baby that we all eat together," JC said firmly. "The baby doesn't know," Kenneth replied, unsure. "The baby knows when you're here and when you're not," JC insisted. Michael smiled as Jennifer rushed to the car. "Hey," he greeted when she got in. "The baby will be fine," Jennifer said cheerfully. "Okay, I knew that," Michael responded. "No, really, the baby will be fine," Jennifer laughed. "We prayed for her." "Him," Michael corrected gently. "Her," Jennifer teased, still smiling. "All right, her. Think you can pray for your mom next? She's driving me a little crazy," Michael joked as he drove off. "She'll calm down once a new place comes up," Jennifer assured him. "Surprise, surprise," Michael replied with a hint of sarcasm. "A man is unfaithful to his wife with you, and you act shocked when he is unfaithful to you? Hey, no need to be harsh. She made a mistake. Everyone makes mistakes," Jennifer defended. Michael glanced at her and noticed a change in her mood. It seemed positive, so he chose to stay quiet, not wanting to upset things. Judge Lori Duplantis was not fond of men. At 62, she had been married twice, and both husbands had betrayed her trust. The first husband not only cheated on her, but also emptied her bank accounts, leaving her with a large mortgage to manage alone. Her second husband maxed out her credit cards and then left with his best friend. Lori often wondered which hurt more, discovering he was dishonest or finding out he was gay. When the judge ordered him to repay the credit card bills, Derek didn't look so pleased. But Derek had the last word. He declared bankruptcy. To protect her own credit rating, Lori had to clear the debt. "Oh, great," Jesse mumbled when the bailiff announced that Judge Duplantis would handle the divorce case. "I thought we were getting Judge James, not her." "Whether you like her or not, it should just be a simple process, right?" Kenneth asked. "It should be, but knowing her, she'll complicate things," Jesse replied with annoyance. The judge sat with a serious expression as both lawyers presented their cases. "But they've been married for 30 years, she interrupted Jesse. "That is true, Your Honor, but they haven't lived together for over 10 years, Jesse argued. "That doesn't matter," Judge Duplantis responded sharply. There should be some compensation for 30 years of loyalty. At that, Kenneth let out a short, bitter laugh. Is something funny, Mr. K? Judge Duplantis asked, raising an eyebrow. Faithful? If she had been, we wouldn't be sitting here, Kenneth snickered. And you, Mr. K? I assume there were no issues on your part, right? Judge Duplantis remarked. Actually, Your Honor, Jesse said, we want to show that Jennifer K led Kenneth K to think she was expecting his child, which led to their marriage. Too late for that, counselor, Judge Duplantis said sharply. What? Jennifer shouted when the judge decided to delay the decision until she reviewed Kenneth's financial records to create a fair settlement for her. No, Your Honor, all I want is a divorce. I don't want. Please rise, the bailiff announced as Judge Lori Duplantis banged her gavel and prepared to leave the courtroom. See? Jesse said quietly. Kenneth, please believe me, I didn't, Jennifer pleaded. I heard everything, Kenneth replied firmly. J.C. looked shocked for a moment before glaring at the door through which Judge Lori Duplantis had exited. What do we do now? J.C. asked Jesse Johnson, her tone sharp. I'll set up a meeting with the judge's clerk and we will move forward from there, Jesse replied. Kenneth, I'm sorry, Jennifer said, wanting to reach out to him, but her daughter stepped in her way. And how long will that take? J.C. asked, looking angrily at her mother. A week or two, Jesse said with a shrug. Great, J.C. snapped, taking Kenneth's hand. Come on, let's go. Sheriff Dick Davis stood next to Jack Landry, a volunteer firefighter working to put out the flames. There must be an accelerant, Jack said. This fire is too intense. I can smell gasoline from here, Dick agreed. Really unfortunate, Jack continued. There was a 1966 Mustang in the garage. Looks like somebody made a hole in the tank to ensure it was destroyed too. Sheriff Dick Davis pondered this for a moment. I see, he said slowly. Oh no, Judge Lori Duplantis yelled as she stepped out of her Lincoln Town car, seeing her home engulfed in flames. This is your home, Your Honor? Dick asked. Yes, Lori shouted in disbelief. Once the fire crew had left and Lori had calmed down a bit, Dick invited her to the station to share any information she could. Kenneth K? Dick asked when Lori shared her day. And Jennifer K? Lori replied sharply, annoyed he forgot her. Kenneth K did 9 years for starting a fire, right? Dick said. Judge Lori Duplantis smirked at that. Nice work, Sheriff, she remarked. Let's bring him in and ask some questions, Sheriff Dick Davis said with a serious look. Kenneth walked in quietly, showing no resistance. I remember the last time I had you in my car, Deputy Orville Jackson said. Really? Kenneth smiled a little. You and that cat, Orville continued. Yeah, Pebbles. She was quite a handful, Kenneth agreed. Dick made Kenneth wait in the interrogation room for 30 minutes before entering. Hi, Kenneth said with a grin. Hi, Dick replied. I saw you at the wedding. It was nice, Kenneth said. Oh yeah, Anne's father, Dick noted, his expression changing. This wasn't how he wanted things to go. The suspect shouldn't be friendly with him. Still, Dick decided to go along with it. So, Judge Lori Duplantis, huh? Dick asked, taking a seat across from Kenneth. What about her? Kenneth replied. I heard she upset you today, Dick said. Yeah, she didn't make me happy, Kenneth replied. She just needed to sign the papers and it would all be over. And then her house suddenly burns down, Dick said. And Kenneth, here's the twist. Your fingerprint is on it. Classic Kenneth K. Oh? Kenneth raised an eyebrow. Yep, right down to making sure the car took some damage too, Dick said. But honestly, I can see why you'd be angry. She could have just signed, right? Yeah, I wish I had done it, Kenneth said. But I was at Chuck E. Cheese with my 2 grandsons, he added with a smile. Really? Dick smiled back. Funny thing is, Chuck E. Cheese has cameras everywhere to keep an eye on things. Good, that should prove I was there, Kenneth replied, still cheerful. By the way, if you ever go, skip the special and just get the pepperoni. I'll remember that, Dick said, standing up. The manager readily shared the footage, and Dick chuckled when he saw Kenneth with his grandsons, guiding 2 small boys around. J.C. mostly kept watch while Kenneth played games, showing love and patience with the kids. Kenneth, let's get you home, Dick said, smiling. Oh? Kenneth looked pleased. Yeah, but this will make my job a bit tougher, Dick replied, still smiling. It would have been really easy to show you were guilty. I can't be the only guy she's upset, Kenneth said. I know. Now I have to talk to all of them, Dick replied as he opened the back door for Kenneth. Hey, honey, Eric called as he walked into the house. Yeah? Anne answered from the laundry room. Hey, he said, kissing her and placing his hand on her belly. The car smells like gas. Do you know why? Yeah, every time I try to fill it up, it won't work, Anne joked, giving him another kiss. What a smart remark. Did you spill gas on it again? Eric asked. Well, it's not my fault. The gas hose is too big for my tank, Anne said with a sigh. Sweetheart, I told you to let me know when it's getting low and I'll fill it up for you, Eric reminded her. Uh-huh, dinner is in the microwave, Anne replied as she folded the last piece of clothing. Just push start. Where did these matches come from? Eric called from the kitchen. Robbie's birthday, remember? I used them for the candles, Anne replied. These big ones? Eric asked, showing her the box of fireplace matches. Yes, the regular ones burn up too quickly, Anne said with a frown. Okay, Eric said with a shrug. Where do you want them? Anywhere is fine. Just remember where you put them for Sammy's birthday, Anne explained. Honey, hit start on the microwave unless you want your pizza cold. Oh, hey, did you all go to Chuck E. Cheese? Eric asked, noticing the box. No, Daddy and JC took the boys and brought us a pizza, Anne said. Cool, that was kind of them, Eric replied with a smile. Then he thought of something. Oh, did you hear what happened? That judge everyone calls the Ice Queen? Her house burned down today, can you believe that? Eric said as he waited for his pizza. Oh, yeah, the house on Candy Lane? Anne asked, gesturing toward it. Yeah, she had this really nice Mustang from '66 and it got burned too, Eric said, whistling as he tried to handle a slice of hot pizza. Judge Lori Duplantis took a leave after her house fire. While she was away, Judge Leonard James handled her cases. K versus K, he said to himself. Counselors, why was there a delay on this? We don't know, Your Honor, Griffin Guillory replied. There's no property to divide. The kids are all grown. What's left to argue about? He asked, sounding frustrated. We're not sure, Your Honor, Jesse Johnson added. Both sides just want to end the marriage. Okay, granted, Judge James said, banging his gavel. Sometimes that woman... JC was quiet as they left the courthouse and quiet as they drove to Clark's for lunch. What's wrong? Kenneth asked. Nothing, JC mumbled. Come on, what's wrong? Kenneth pressed. Jadia got married and now Mom is going to get married, JC said, wiping away tears as they began to fall. But you and I can't be close because there's some silly paper that says you're my father, even though we both know you're not, and I have to pretend to be happy for Mother and Jadia, but I'm not. She buried her head in his chest and cried even harder. I mean, Jadia's wedding was so beautiful, and Mother is even having a wedding, which is just a small ceremony, but still, she gets a wedding. How is that fair? She has never done anything for anyone but herself, and even she gets a wedding, but I don't? It's just not right, JC cried. I would, Kenneth said, kissing the top of her head. I would ask you to marry me in an instant. You wouldn't have to ask, JC sobbed. I'd be the happiest girl in the world. I'm sorry, Kenneth said sadly. I'm sorry I can't give you a big wedding with the dress and everything, but you know in my heart we are together, right? That's great, JC said bitterly. I mean, Jadia can look at her wedding pictures. She and Eric have a big album full of them. You and Mother had a bunch of pictures taken, and now she's probably going to get more with Michael. He seems questionable, right? Everyone has something they can look at and say, see, I'm married. Kenneth had no words to ease his little girl's pain, so he stayed quiet. At that moment, Kizzy Clark popped her head in the window. Brr, it's cold out here, she said. Hey, JC, what's up? Hey, Kizzy. JC tried to smile for her friend. Chili burger with no extra spice, root beer float, and a smokehouse burger with bacon and a chocolate malt, Kenneth ordered, trying to smile at the girl. Sorry, I think I'm all over the place with my feelings, JC finally said. No, sweetheart, Kenneth said gently. Sometimes life just isn't fair. He looked out the window as Kizzy skated toward them. I sometimes wake up in the middle of the night feeling like I'm back in a bad place, he shared, lowering the window for Kizzy. It feels so real, the noise, the feelings of fear and anger, he continued after Kizzy had passed. But then, I feel you next to me, smell your hair, hear you breathing, Kenneth added. I don't make any noise, JC protested. You're expecting a baby, honey, he smiled. Of course you have your moments. He took a bite of his burger. After chewing, he swallowed and looked at her. Is it fair that I was away for so long? No, it's not. I could be bitter about what happened with your mother and others, how they treated me, he said, taking a sip of his malt. Or I could just enjoy laying in that bed, feeling you close to me, smelling your hair, everything about you, he joked, laughing when she playfully hit his arm. And I could be thankful. What would you prefer? He asked as he finished his burger. The man in Angola, the ruthless person. Daddy, you're not like that, JC insisted. No, I'm not, he agreed. But honey, back then I had to be. JC's eyes widened as she looked at him. You, she whispered, hesitant to ask more. I got through it, he said and started the car. Or, he continued, would you rather have the person who is thankful and cherishes every moment with you? I love you, Daddy, she said. Someone cut the wires on Judge Lori Duplantis' car battery. The next week, someone put a potato in her car's exhaust. Judge Lori Duplantis decided to take an early retirement and left her position. She was very upset when Jesse Johnson, someone she believed had no respect for women, was given her old job. While she was driving to the grocery store, someone threw a brick through her back window, and Lori stopped complaining about Jesse Johnson's appointment. Hey, Anne smiled as she walked into the kitchen. Hey, Mommy, Kenneth teased. JC told me you all didn't have any work right now, Anne said, giving Kenneth a warm kiss. Nope, no one is working right now, Kenneth sighed. He was bored, just waiting for rain to call. Yesterday he was so restless that he dug out the old lawnmower from the garage and cut the grass, even though he knew the pollen would be bad. As he struggled with the pollen, a strange car pulled up to the curb. Great, Kenneth muttered as Jennifer and Michael Green got out of the car. He greeted them politely and offered drinks. Michael asked for a beer, but Jennifer's look made him change it to iced tea. I bet you're wondering why I'm here, Jennifer finally said with a forced smile. No, not really, Kenneth lied. Oh, well, Kenneth, it's like this, Jennifer stuttered. Kenneth just stared at her, making things awkward. I'm here to apologize, Jennifer finally mumbled. She fumbled through her apology while Kenneth continued to watch her. Finally, he smiled a little sadly. The sad thing is, he said, sipping his iced tea, I can hear you saying sorry, but I can tell you don't even know what you're apologizing for. Michael jumped in to defend his wife, but Kenneth just smirked. Eventually, Jennifer and Michael left. Kenneth sat in the kitchen for almost an hour, trying to gather himself before going back outside to finish the lawn. JC, of course, was very angry that her mother came to their house and ranted until bedtime. Even as they went to bed, she still grumbled. She would do that, she said bitterly. She would come over and get you all worked up when she knows I can't do anything about it. Not all worked up, Kenneth replied, kissing JC on her neck. If that was her plan, it didn't succeed. I mean, get you all anxious. If you want to, go ahead, but I probably won't, JC said, moving her legs a bit. Kenneth, I don't want to, okay? Kenneth smiled and kissed her neck again. All I want is to fall asleep holding my girlfriend, he assured her, and she slowly relaxed and soon began to snore. Want some coffee? Kenneth asked as he stood up. Ugh, Anne groaned, pointing to her stomach. With her jumping around? No thanks. Her, huh? Kenneth inquired, and Anne nodded with a smile. Well, third time's a charm, Kenneth said, noticing Anne's smile faded immediately. Fourth, Anne said quietly. She sat up straighter in her chair and leaned closer to Kenneth. I never told you this, but, Anne said, hesitating for a moment. She took a deep breath and looked at him. This would have been number 4 for me, Anne confessed. You see, when Jalissa and I were staying with Mama, there was a boy in the courtyard. We tried some things together, and the next thing I knew, I was in a tough situation. And then I found out I was going to have a baby. Mama had always warned us, better not come home in trouble. So I went to the clinic, and sure enough, I was expecting. Here, Kenneth said, handing Anne a glass of ice water. Anyway, Anne continued after taking a sip of water, They didn't say much, just took me in the back, and next thing I know, I'm waking up and they tell me everything will be okay, and oh God. Anne began to cry. Kenneth hugged her tightly as she held on to him. I realized it was a huge mistake right after it happened, but by then it was too late, Anne said, her voice shaky. I pray every night, begging for forgiveness. When Grandpa and Grandma passed away, I went to their coffins and asked them to look for my little girl. The nurse said they couldn't tell if it was a boy or girl, but I just knew it was a girl. When Jalissa died, I told her to find my little Jody and let her know that Mommy is sorry and that I'll be there soon. Jody? Kenneth asked. Yeah, in 3rd grade, a teacher thought my name was misspelled, so when she called the roll, she said Jody. I thought, I wish I had that name, it sounds cool. So I named my little girl that, Anne said with a sad smile. They sat quietly for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. So, what are you doing here? Kenneth finally asked. I'm really happy to see you, Anne said with a smile. Robbie and Sammy were at school, and their father was calling her constantly. He claimed he had rights, even though he had never paid any support for the kids. Anne sighed. I needed to get away, so I came here. What do you mean? Kenneth asked, confused. Their biological father, Anne clarified. He signed away his rights to Robbie and Sammy, but now he's saying I owe him money. Honestly, I think he's using something because he doesn't sound right. I wanted to talk to you about that, Kenneth said hesitantly. About what? She asked, sipping her water. Well, Robbie and Sammy, they're black and... Kenneth trailed off, looking uncomfortable. I see where this is going, Anne replied with a tight smile. This probably sounds silly, but, you know? Kenneth continued, still uneasy. When you have one black child, do you really go back? Anne said, raising her eyebrows. Well, yeah, and Eric is white, right? Kenneth added. Let me tell you about it, Anne began. Jalissa brought over Cecil once, and he had some great stuff. We hung out, and then it happened so fast. Next thing I knew, I was pregnant again. I thought I was done with that, but there I was, expecting another baby. Kenneth nodded, listening closely. Years later, he returned, gave me some cash, and said he'd support the kids. I was lonely, honestly. But then he just took off again, leaving me with another surprise pregnancy. Now I knew I wouldn't get anything from him, Anne said, emptying her glass. So no, if that's what going black is like, count me out. Eric is different. He cares for me, she said. Suddenly, Anne stood up. I'll be right back. I really need to use the bathroom, she said, hurrying down the hall. Kenneth sat, sipping his coffee, when he suddenly heard a loud noise. Oh, no! Anne exclaimed from the bathroom. Are you okay? Kenneth asked, standing up. Oh, not now, she exclaimed, sounding a bit panicked. Kenneth rushed to the bathroom door. What happened? He asked. My water broke, Anne said, half laughing, half groaning. Looks like Evie's in a hurry to get here. All right, I'm coming in there, Kenneth called out. Hurry! Anne groaned. Sheriff, Dick Davis said when his phone rang. Hi, Sheriff. This is Kenneth Kay, Eric's father-in-law, Kenneth said cheerfully as he stepped on the gas in his pickup truck. Tell Officer Green to head over to Women and Children in Lafayette. He's about to be a dad. Got it, Dick replied. Good. I tried his cell, but he didn't answer, Kenneth said as he merged onto I-10 heading west. Dad? Anne said, holding her belly. Yeah, love? Kenneth asked, maneuvering through traffic. I love you, Anne said, her voice shaking. Love you too, Kenneth replied and pressed a number on his phone. Hi, Dad, JC answered. Did Anne come see you? Yep, but she left a bit of a mess in the bathroom for me to clean up, Kenneth said. Sorry about that, Anne groaned. Aw, man, she couldn't wait? JC asked. Nope, not at all, Kenneth agreed. I'll take care of it when I get home, JC sighed. Oh, don't worry about it, Kenneth said. But could you stop by St. Richard's and pick up Sammy and Robbie? Their sister is on the way. She is? JC exclaimed. But not for a while. Nope, Evie says she's coming right now, Kenneth said, and he had to hang up as traffic slowed. Oh, no! Anne cried out as a wave of pain hit her. Uh-huh. Hang on, Kenneth said, pulling to the side of the road. I don't know what all these cars are doing, but they're in my way. Evie Ann Green arrived just 22 minutes later than planned. Eric Green arrived to see mother and daughter, but was 12 minutes behind. Better late than never, Kenneth smiled as he received thanks from his son-in-law. Ew, you smell, Anne complained when her husband hugged her. Sorry, love, I was at a fire when the sheriff called me, Eric said, his smile fading. Oh, what kind of fire? Anne asked, worried. One at 1251 Court, Eric said, his expression serious. 12! Our house? What? Anne shouted. Shh, Eric said, trying to calm her. Eric, are you serious? Anne gasped. Afraid so, Eric said. Cecil had not heard anything from Jediah. She had hung up on him the last 2 times he called, and she wasn't answering the door. I have rights, Cecil shouted. He walked to the backyard and tried to enter through the sliding door. Then he noticed the tool shed. Opening it, he saw 2 cans of gasoline and smiled. He decided to follow Kenneth K's lead. He brought the gas cans to the glass door and broke one of the doors by throwing a heavy planter through it. Then he went inside and spread gasoline everywhere. Cecil forgot an important step in his plan. He didn't go outside before lighting the match. Trapped in the sudden fire, Cecil could not find a way out. Okay, while everyone is here, is anyone about to have a baby? Kenneth asked as Jennifer and JC entered the room to see Anne and Evie. Stop it! JC laughed and made sure her mom saw her kiss Kenneth on the cheek. Then JC wrapped her arm around Kenneth's waist and looked at Jennifer, daring her to come near him. Michael, Jennifer's husband, was captivated by the little blonde girl feeding from her mother. Oh my God, do you think Mary will look like that? He whispered to Jennifer. Maybe, or heaven help her, she might look like you, Jennifer joked. Mary? Anne asked, frowning. Yeah, she wanted to name our daughter Star Apple Green, Michael said. I told her no way you are not giving my kid a strange name. So we agreed on Mary Michelle Green. Mary? Anne asked again. I had to go through life with Jediah, and this kid is getting a normal name? Thanks a lot, Mom. Eric, can I talk to you for a minute? Kenneth nodded toward the door. In the hallway, Kenneth asked about the damage to his home. It's a total loss, Eric replied. What didn't get burned needs to be taken down anyway. So, you'll need a place to stay, Kenneth said, reaching into his pocket. He took out his keys and separated 2 of them. Front door and back door, he said. Thank you, Kenneth, Eric replied, and the 2 men shared a hug. JC and Kenneth agreed that Eric could use JC's car. Eric's had been in the garage when the house burned, and Anne's was still at JC and Kenneth's house. JC joked about needing help to get into the truck. But of course Robbie and Sammy can stay with us, JC said as Kenneth drove down the road. Where else would they? Oh! Is something wrong? Kenneth asked. No, just a little kick, JC said, her face turning pale. Uh-huh, Kenneth said, turning on his signal. What are you doing? JC asked. Turning around, Kenneth replied. But Daddy, I told you it's... Oh, JC protested. That sounds important, Kenneth said, speeding past a slow taxi. Wonder what's going on? Oh, Eric exclaimed as he watched his father-in-law make a U-turn on the wide street. 14 hours after bringing Anne to the hospital, Kenneth K. held his son, Kenneth K. Jr., for the first time. The boy had his mother's deep brown eyes and soft curls of brown hair. Jennifer gave birth to Mary Michelle Green 41 hours after Evie Ann Green was born. Mary was just as wonderful as she had predicted, even with her beautiful blonde hair. Wow, some people will go to great lengths to avoid work, right? Grace said when she and Mindy walked into the small private room. True, she was very creative with her idea. I wouldn't have thought of that, Mindy replied. Eric Green parked his van in the spot for people with disabilities at the Bender Police Department. He used to be a police officer. Eric had worn his dark blue uniform and badge, number 4844B921, with pride. His wife, Anne, would admire him in uniform and often express how much she loved a man in that outfit. They had shared many intimate moments during those times. After parking, Eric unlocked his wheelchair and rolled to the side door of the van. He pressed a button and the door slid open. He pressed another button and the lift came down. He carefully wheeled onto the lift and lowered himself to the ground. Hey, find another spot. That's for those who really need it, Officer Stephen Hebert shouted at Eric. Eric smiled at his old friend and raised the lift again before closing the van door. Good to see you too, Hebert, Eric said as he rolled toward the front door of the building. Looking sharp, Stephen said, leaning down to give Eric a friendly hug. You too, Eric replied with a smile, giving his friend a pat on the back. As he entered the building, Eric greeted a few more former colleagues before signing in and heading toward the reception area. He had been a cop, but one night, everything changed. He stopped at a local coffee shop for a drink and walked into a robbery. The robbers fired shots, and one bullet hit him in the neck. He had managed to protect others but was left paralyzed from the chest down. Fortunately, the two coffee shop employees were safe. Afterward, he spent weeks feeling sorry for himself in the hospital. Later, he stayed at Anne's sister's house since their home had burned down a month earlier, still feeling lost and overwhelmed. His sister-in-law, JC, had shared some news. She was pregnant again. Eric congratulated her, but it didn't mean much to him at the time. Until one night, Anne lay beside him and cried, expressing her wish for another child. "Well, Anne, I'll see what I can do," he replied, letting his frustration show. "Really? You won't even try?" Anne shot back with anger. She sat up, her eyes intense. "I get it, you were hurt," she yelled. "But you're not the only one struggling. I am too. And so are Robbie and Sammy, our sons. Remember them?" They were both walking on eggshells, worried that anything they did might upset her. Anne got out of bed. "Evie's too young to understand, but she feels it too. Daddy and JC are struggling too. We're all hurting, Eric. We're all hurting here," Anne yelled before leaving the bedroom in frustration. A few hours later, smelling of beer and marijuana, Anne returned to bed and hugged him tightly. "I'm sorry, baby," she said. "I just miss my husband. I miss my man." "I miss him too," Eric replied sharply. "No, Eric, you don't," Anne said, touching his head gently. "He's still here inside you," she added. "If you really missed him, you would try to find him for me." A few days later, Kenneth Kay, Eric's father-in-law, came to help him dress for their regular trip to the physical therapist, which Eric's insurance covered. "Anne talked with us last night," Kenneth said, turning a bit red. "Really?" Eric replied, letting Kenneth help him dress. "She said she wants a baby," Kenneth said, straining a little as he lifted Eric into the wheelchair. "Yeah, she told me that too," Eric said, annoyed as Kenneth pushed him down the hallway. "I told her. She wants me to help since you can't," Kenneth blurted out. They were quiet as Kenneth wheeled Eric to the car and helped him into the front seat. Joanne, Eric's physical therapist, listened as Eric shared his wife's wishes. "Well, Officer Green, that sounds pretty difficult," she said. "See, I told you," Eric responded. "Since I can't even get you to push your own chair," Joanne replied firmly. "Really? Kenneth has to lift you? Are you serious? You think you can manage to do anything more than this?" She finished the session and pointed to his wheelchair. "It's right there. Get in," she instructed. Eric struggled, but finally managed after a tough effort. Then Joanne told Eric to wheel himself to the waiting room where Kenneth was flipping through an old magazine. "You know, there are plenty of good magazines out there if you look," Kenneth said casually. "No, Mr. K, I'm not getting Parasol's magazine," Joanne said with a smile. "What about Reader's Digest?" Kenneth replied. Kenneth helped Eric into the car. He was surprised when Eric managed to get himself into the front seat. It was tough work, but Eric was making steady progress. "Go ahead," Eric told Kenneth one morning as Kenneth drove them to Joanne's office. "Go ahead with what?" Kenneth asked as he parked the car. "Go ahead, Anne really wants a baby," Eric explained. "Are you sure? You're doing really well here," Kenneth said. "Her happiness is important." "Yes, Kenneth, go ahead," Eric sighed. That first night, Eric wasn't confident they would conceive. Anne was very anxious. Kenneth was also nervous and had trouble eating. After dinner, Eric helped Robbie and Sammy with their schoolwork while Anne and Kenneth stepped away. His sister-in-law, JC, cleaned up the kitchen, wiping the counter repeatedly. Once Robbie and Sammy had their baths, put on pajamas, said their prayers, and went to bed, Eric wheeled himself to the bedroom he shared with Anne. Anne was sitting up in bed, wearing a new outfit she had bought before Eric's injury. "Hey there," she said, smiling at him. "Hi," he replied, pulling himself into bed. "I thought you might like this," she said, playfully adjusting her outfit. "Did you wear that for him?" Eric asked, realizing immediately he had spoken without thinking. "I got this for my husband," Anne snapped, feeling hurt. "I would never wear something like this for anyone but you." She changed into a simple shirt and came back to bed. "I'm sorry," Eric said softly, reaching for her shoulder. "Don't touch me," she said angrily. "Right now, I could be very upset with you, you know?" They had planned for Anne's most fertile days, and each night that week, Anne and Kenneth would spend time together after dinner. After the first night's awkwardness, Anne quickly got dressed and helped JC clean up, assisting Eric with the kids. When Anne's period arrived, it was right on time, so she and Kenneth waited for her next fertile period. Meanwhile, Eric considered going back to school. He enrolled at the University of Louisiana at DeGard's Law School and began studying hard. "Thank you," Anne said one night, kissing him gently. "I'm glad you're back. We missed you." Eric Vincent Green Jr. was born, and Eric was there to support Anne during the delivery. Now, as he sat in a small cinder-block room waiting for his next client, Eric smiled to himself. JC and Kenneth had nervously shared the news that they were expecting another baby. Anne's blue eyes widened with surprise, and Eric sensed that his wife might soon suggest they should have another child as well. "Hello, Mr. Green," Sergeant Elise Richards called, placing extra emphasis on Mr. "Hi, Sergeant Richards," Eric responded with a smile as she led his client into the room. "This is Mrs. Romero," Elise introduced him to Betty Romero, a striking brunette. The orange jumpsuit did little to hide her figure. When she sat down, it was clear she had a curvy shape. However, what stood out most were her large blue eyes, now filled with fear. "Hi, I'm Eric Green, your lawyer," he said, and she looked at him, attempting a smile but falling short. They did not shake hands. Betty's right hand was still bandaged. "I guess the first question is, did you do it?" Eric asked as the door clicked shut behind Elise. "Do what?" Betty replied softly. "Did you harm your husband, Butch Romero?" Eric asked directly. "Yeah," she admitted, staring at her hands. Eric remained silent, waiting for her to say more. Finally, she looked up. "But I had a good reason," she said. "And that is—" He encouraged after a pause. "He was trying to hurt my boyfriend," Betty confessed, and Eric sighed. A wife defending her boyfriend from a jealous husband might not find much sympathy from a jury. "So let's start from the beginning," he said. Betty Smith, not Elizabeth Smith, was born in Flagstaff, Arkansas, to Terry Smith. In school, Terry became friends with a girl named Betty and decided that if she had a daughter, she would name her Betty. Terry didn't realize that Betty is a nickname for Elizabeth and didn't know that most babies have middle names, so Betty had none. Neighbors called the police because the baby was always screaming and crying. When officers arrived, they found Betty in her crib, very malnourished. Her dirty diaper had to be carefully removed because it had been there for days. Terry returned carrying a box of diapers and jars of baby food. "Ma'am, that's not suitable for an infant," one of the officers informed the 18-year-old. "It says right here it's baby food," Terry argued. "I can read, you know." "And where have you been?" asked the other officer. "Out getting things for my baby," Terry replied bluntly. "I have to pay for this stuff." So, just like her mother, Betty began her life moving between foster homes and whatever rundown places her mother lived in. When Betty was 9, her mother married Wesley Wormstead, becoming the stepmother to Wesley's 3 sons. Betty left the Davidson foster home to live in a nice brick house in a good neighborhood and started attending Good Hope Academy. At age 11, Betty began to grow and change. Terry noticed but tried to ignore it. However, she couldn't overlook it any longer when her husband, Wesley, made an inappropriate comment. "Looks like she's growing up fast," Wesley remarked with a crude laugh. "Stop," Terry said, pushing his hand away, uncomfortable with his remarks. "Bet she won't stop me," Wesley muttered, making Terry feel even more unsettled. Wesley's sons, Eldon and Derek, also made comments about Betty's growing up, which prompted Terry to take action. She called her Aunt Agnes for help. Aunt Agnes, Terry's mother's sister, lived in a large house and was known to have some money. Though the family had distanced themselves from her for years, especially because of her habits like smoking and drinking, they quickly welcomed her back after she won a lottery. But Agnes chose to keep her distance from the family. Terry wasn't asking for herself. She was asking for Betty's safety. So Betty found herself in a new environment once again, but this time, Aunt Agnes welcomed her with warmth and care. At her new home with Aunt Agnes, Betty learned how to play, laugh, and enjoy life. Despite Agnes's habits, she also read the Bible every night, teaching Betty to pray and instilling good values in her. Meanwhile, back at the Wormstead household, Wesley, Eldon, and Derek were furious with Terry for sending Betty away. "You shouldn't have sent her off," Wesley angrily said, making Terry feel even more trapped. For Betty, the next 7 years were full of love and care in a good Christian home, a time of peace and happiness. For Terry, however, life became much harder. She felt helpless and alone, but she had no way out of the toxic situation. Then one day the news came that Aunt Agnes had passed away. She had been taking care of her garden when she noticed a wasp nest. In response, she aimed her garden hose at the troublesome spot. The Smith family learned that Aunt Agnes was not wealthy. She had been managing on a tight budget like many others in the area. Her house was taken away due to unpaid taxes, and Betty had to move back to the Wormstead house. "Wow! Look at Betty getting out of Terry's car!" Eldon exclaimed. Derek tried to look, but Wesley held Derek's head firmly in place. Within a week of her 18-year-old daughter coming back home, Terry found it hard to get along with her. She had to remind Wesley that she was his wife and deserved attention. This led to a confrontation, but Derek did offer her some affection afterward. After a few months, Terry came up with a plan. She prepared a beautiful Thanksgiving-style dinner with turkey, stuffing, yams, gravy, and green beans. She even got Betty to help her. "Don't eat the gravy," she warned her. The two women stayed away from the gravy, and soon after enjoying the feast, all the Wormstead men were in discomfort. Terry searched their wallets and hidden money. "Here, this is all I have," she told her daughter, also giving her the car keys. "Hurry up before they catch on." Betty was unsure where to go, but she knew she didn't want to stay in Flagstaff, Arkansas. She drove south on Highway 467 until she reached Stepping Stone, Louisiana. There, she stopped at a diner known for its delicious chili. Betty had to agree that the chili was fantastic, and the waitress mentioned that few people ever asked for a second bowl. "Are you serious? This is amazing," Betty said happily. "My Aunt Agnes used to cook just like this." Still unsure where to head next, but wanting to avoid Wesley, Eldon, Percy, and Derek, she decided to leave Highway 467. Betty got onto Highway 52 and drove west. In Bender, Louisiana, Betty spotted a coffee shop. Aunt Agnes had introduced her to coffee, so she decided to stop in. As she entered, the only customer noticed her right away. Betty frowned at the menu and finally asked the server, who was busy texting, "Do you have plain coffee? Express blend? Superior blend? Excelsior blend?" the girl replied. "Morgan, just give the girl the superior blend," the customer said. "She doesn't need to know the fancy names." "The Express is a mix of espresso and regular coffee," the man explained, as Morgan poured a steaming mug of the superior blend. "The superior coffee is their regular choice, and the Excelsior is only good for painting a house." "Stop complaining, Butch, I like it," Morgan said. "Sure, that's why you blanked when this young lady asked you something simple," Butch responded. "Hi, I'm Butch Romero." "Betty Smith," Betty replied. "Not from around here, right?" Butch smiled and led Betty to his booth. Betty learned that Butch was a long-distance truck driver and thought it must be an exciting job. What Butch didn't mention was that he was currently on a break from work due to a problem with drugs. They talked over coffee, though Butch bent the truth every chance he got. Eventually, Morgan asked them to leave, and Betty went home with Butch to his simple house. When a knock came at her door, Betty decided to let things happen. It seemed easier to be with one man than several. Because of his drug issue, Butch had some trouble being intimate. Betty didn't laugh. She knew better. Her previous partner had reacted badly when she laughed at him. "That's okay. I'm just tired from driving," Betty said gently, giving Butch a soft kiss. Later, he managed to connect with Betty, and she acted like it was a wonderful moment, even if it didn't last long. When Butch struggled again, he became upset. Betty comforted him, saying he was still her hero. Butch then made a plan. He saw Betty as beautiful and didn't realize how attractive she truly was with her sweet face and confident attitude. "Do you want me to help some of your friends?" Betty asked, shrugging. "If that's what makes you happy, I can do that." Paul, a friend, came and put in a two-way mirror between their rooms. He turned down Butch's offer to trade his services for favors. "Married and happy," he said, showing them his wedding ring. "Oh," Betty sighed. always a romantic. Butch's first guest couldn't hold back when entering Betty's room. "Wow, those are amazing!" he exclaimed. Betty sat in front of the mirror, her face showing frustration. "Best $200 I ever spent," the man said with a grin. "And what exactly did you get for $200? Betty asked, glaring at him. "A little bit of everything," the man replied as he started taking off his clothes. Betty sighed and went along with what was expected, keeping up appearances even though her mind was elsewhere. She let him finish and pretended to enjoy it, knowing that her reactions were what kept the customers satisfied. As soon as the man left, Butch barged into her room, clearly eager for his turn. Betty forced a smile and endured it, knowing that this was her life now. One morning, after living with Butch for a couple of weeks, Betty asked, "I thought you were a trucker. When are you hitting the road?" Butch, clearly upset, sat down and shared the story of how he had been suspended from his job. Betty was angry, realizing that the money he had been making from his friends was being wasted. "You're spending everything on that nonsense?" she yelled, slapping him in frustration. Butch tried to apologize, but Betty was too angry to listen. Their argument spiraled, and eventually, Butch forced himself on her while she kept shouting and hitting him. Later, two of Butch's friends came over, and Betty had to deal with them too, while Butch watched through a mirror. As soon as they left, Butch rushed into the room, still desperate for attention. "We need to get married," Butch said, breathless. Betty knew she didn't love Butch. She didn't even like him much. But the idea of marriage seemed like a step forward, so she agreed. The 18-year-old Betty and the 33-year-old Butch gathered their documents and headed to the courthouse to get married. After the simple ceremony, Betty asked, "No ring? I wanted a ring to show I'm married." Reluctantly, Butch took her to a jewelry store and bought a small ring. They celebrated their wedding with a quick lunch of wings from a nearby restaurant. As they sat eating, Butch's attention wandered to two young women laughing and chatting at a nearby table. When one playfully pinched the other, Butch's face flushed. "You ever, been with a girl?" he asked awkwardly. Betty recoiled, disgusted. "No, absolutely not," she replied firmly. Their wedding night was uneventful, as Butch was unable to perform. But the following day, he had arranged for 4 more of his friends to visit, leaving Betty to handle the situation alone, once again facing the reality of her new life. Betty was growing used to the strange things in her life with Butch. His friends had been visiting regularly, and after each one left, Butch would come into her room, as if he couldn't get enough of her attention. One morning, a few weeks after their wedding, Butch made an odd request. He asked Betty to fill a jar with urine. It seemed strange, but Betty was used to his unusual requests by now. "You really want to watch?" she asked, noticing his excitement. Betty reluctantly went along with it, filling the jar as he watched. She was startled when Butch reacted by making another inappropriate move. She quickly stood up and scolded him, making it clear she wasn't pleased with his behavior. A few days later, Butch received some good news over the phone. "I'm cleared. I can go back on the road," he said, clearly happy about returning to his trucking job. "Is that why you needed the jar?" Betty asked, starting to understand his motives. "Yeah," he admitted sheepishly. "When are you leaving?" she asked as she prepared dinner. "Tuesday. It's a short trip. I'll be back by Thursday," Butch replied. Betty, stirring the chili, asked calmly, "Will any of your friends be stopping by while you're gone?" Butch became defensive. "No, they won't. Why? Are you going to miss them?" Betty smiled faintly, knowing how to handle the situation. "No, I'll only miss you," she said gently, playing along. In reality, she wouldn't miss any of it, but she knew how fragile Butch's ego could be. Butch, clearly pleased, mentioned he had a surprise for her later that evening. After dinner, Betty went through her routine, taking a bath and preparing herself for whatever surprise Butch had in mind. Later, she waited in the room Butch's friends usually used. To her shock, a nervous young woman entered the room. "Are those, real?" the blonde girl asked awkwardly, unsure of herself. Betty's patience was wearing thin, and she glared at the mirror, wondering how far Butch's surprises would go. "I mean, I think I think I might be gay," the girl stammered, clearly uncomfortable as she placed her purse on a chair. Betty didn't know how to react, but she realized she was caught in another one of Butch's plans. She remained calm, though internally she was furious with the situation that kept unfolding in her life. Betty was still angry at Butch, but she knew this wasn't the girl's fault. The young woman seemed nervous and out of place. "I really need to use the bathroom. Is there one nearby?" the girl asked, looking uneasy. "Right over here," Betty said, pointing toward the bathroom. The girl's eyes widened. "Oh my God, you've got such a sweet voice," she whispered. "Not too country?" Betty joked, trying to lighten the mood. "I feel like I might be sick," the girl admitted, and Betty quickly showed her to the bathroom. Still fuming at Butch, Betty stormed into his room. "I told you I wasn't into this," she shouted, catching him off guard. "Oh my God, you're seriously messed up," Betty said, disgusted as she saw him sitting in his chair, clearly doing something inappropriate. The girl came out of the bathroom, startled by the noise. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know," she mumbled. Betty slammed Butch's door shut, trying to contain her frustration, and returned to the girl in the other room. "Listen, you don't have to do anything you're uncomfortable with," Betty reassured her, speaking gently. The girl seemed embarrassed. "I even shaved because I read somewhere that some women like that, but it's really itchy," she said awkwardly. Betty, trying to ease the tension, asked, "Shaved? Let me see." The girl shyly lowered her jeans slightly. "It's cute," Betty said kindly, though she was feeling conflicted inside. "What's your name?" Betty asked, hoping to shift the conversation to something more normal. "Colette, but my friends call me Collie, like the dog," the girl replied. Betty smiled and squeezed her hand. "Nice to meet you, Collie. My name's Betty." Collie, still nervous, leaned in and kissed Betty. Betty fought the urge to pull away, but managed to stay calm, remembering how awkward she had felt in similar situations. After a moment, Collie asked, "Is it okay if I get more comfortable?" "Sure," Betty said, trying to keep the situation light and non-threatening. As Collie removed her clothing, Betty did her best to keep the conversation going, commenting on the girl's belly button ring. "That's cute," she said, gently tugging at it. "Should I get one too?" "God, no," Collie laughed, clearly more at ease now. Betty kept the atmosphere friendly, though she knew she wasn't comfortable with what was happening. Inside, she was doing her best to manage the situation calmly, waiting for it to be over. "You're really beautiful just the way you are. Don't change a thing," Collie said happily. "What do you want to do now?" Betty asked as Collie placed her clothes on the chair. Betty felt a wave of discomfort when she noticed Collie's body as the girl bent over. "I need to use the bathroom," Collie said quickly and left the room. Betty stood up and looked in the mirror, pretending to punch Butch. "Where did your boyfriend go?" Collie asked when she returned to the room. "I think he's in the garage working on his car," Betty replied with a smirk. She wasn't sure if Butch could hear them, but knew he was very defensive about his old car. Betty shifted in her chair. The sooner she could finish with Collie, the sooner she could wash away the experience and refresh herself. And maybe scold Butch, too. The conversation continued for a while before Collie finally calmed down and left. Betty then marched to Butch's bedroom. "Open this door right now!" Betty shouted when she found the door locked. "I mean it!" She banged on the door. She went to the kitchen, grabbed a butter knife, and tried to unlock the door. But when she got the door unlocked, she realized Butch had blocked it with a chair. After cleaning herself and getting rid of the smell in the room, Betty grabbed some air freshener and used it before going to sleep. When Butch came in on Tuesday, he was surprised when they asked him for another urine test. He gave a sample, got his duty log, and went on his run. Lucky for him, the dispatcher forgot to pick up the sample, so it sat on a shelf until Friday morning when Butch had finished his round. The dispatcher ended up throwing it away. "All right, Romero, you've got to run to Durbo, Montana," said the dispatcher. "I need you here Wednesday morning, got it?" "Leave sooner if you want me to," Butch replied, glancing cautiously at Betty. Even though time had passed, Betty's anger about what happened with Megan hadn't faded. The other woman had already sent Butch 4 messages, asking for more time with Betty. Butch had seen Betty's lovely face near the other woman, and it had stirred up feelings in him, even if he felt guilty about it. But Betty had made it clear to Butch that she would never again be with another woman. Butch sent Megan his apologies, but Betty was not free to talk. In a locker room at the University of Louisiana at DeGard, after a tough karate class, Collie wiped the sweat from her forehead, took her towel and soap from her locker, and headed to the shower. "Wow, Collie, you're really improving," LaDawn Jones, a friendly girl, said as she joined Collie in the shower area. "Thanks," Collie replied with a smile. "You're already good too. You have a yellow belt, right?" "Are you thinking about shaving?" LaDawn asked, noticing Collie's style. "Pretty as that is? I wouldn't," Collie said as she looked at LaDawn's hair. "Do you really think it's nice?" LaDawn asked, turning around to show Collie. "Yeah," Collie said, feeling a little shy, hoping the other girls weren't paying attention. "So, what are you doing after this?" "I heard Early's doesn't check IDs. I have a bottle of gin in my room," LaDawn whispered as she stepped under the warm water next to Collie. While Betty wasn't involved with Megan, she had planned dates with some other men, arranged by Butch. Butch earned quite a bit from friends and found some time with Betty during those days. While he was away, Betty got the address for the St. Elizabeth Parish Public Library and drove there. She loved reading. Aunt Agnes had many books, and Betty had read almost all of them. There was nothing decent to read at Butch's house, only magazines that didn't interest her. Choosing a book of short stories, Betty found a cozy chair and started to read. She was almost finished with the first story when she felt someone watching her. Looking up, she noticed a young man in his 20s sitting across from her, writing quickly in a notebook. She lowered her book, and he looked up. He gasped at the sight of her, quickly blushing and looking down at his notes. She looked at him for a moment before going back to her book. Dean finished his drawing of the young woman, then took out his phone and quickly took 3 photos of her, worried his teacher might say he wasn't drawing what was real. He wrote something on another piece of paper, tore it out of his sketch pad, and stood up. "You are very beautiful," Betty read as the note fell between her and her book. She looked up, surprised, but the person who dropped the note was gone. She smiled and carefully folded the paper. As Dean had feared, Paul accused him of exaggerating the girl's beauty until Dean showed him the photos he had taken. "Yeah, I think I've seen her," another student said, pulling out his phone to show a picture from a website. Dean stared at the image, remembered the web address, and returned to his spot. "Those have to be fake. No one looks like that," the girl next to Dean said. "Why don't you check for yourself?" Dean shot back and showed her the pictures again. Later that night, safe in his apartment, Dean looked up the website. It mentioned that the woman's name was Sapphire. She had just turned 18, and she was looking for help. Since she came from a humble background, everyone was encouraged to support her, but she was not a worker. However, for a higher donation, there were options. Dean searched through his wallet and took out a couple of $100 bills, deciding to send an email to Sapphire. "What can I get for $400? he asked. "Hi there. You're not a cop, are you?" came the reply 20 minutes later. "No, I'm just an art student," he replied. Her next message confirmed that he wasn't with any law enforcement. $400 is a lot. What do you want to do?" Sapphire replied. Dean thought about it for a moment. Earlier at the library, he had been drawing a little girl as she played with her mother in the children's area. The girl was a lovely mix of backgrounds, having fun with finger paints while her mother encouraged her. Then, something caught his attention, and he saw a beautiful brunette sitting nearby reading. He hadn't seen her face, but her long, shiny brown hair and the way she carried herself in a fitted dress were very striking. As she sat there, he could see a small edge of her white cotton underwear. Dean stopped trying to engage the child's excitement and focused instead on the amazing presence of the woman. What did he want to do? He wanted to be close to her, to admire her beauty, to draw and paint her, and to share quiet moments of connection. "You still there, sugar?" Sapphire asked. At home, Betty remembered the author of the gripping story Half a World Away and decided to check online for any other stories by that author. Zephyr, she thought, starting to read. Her eyes began to ache from reading, but she pushed through to finish the story, even though science fiction wasn't her favorite type of book. "Dinner," Sergeant Elise Richards called after knocking on the door. "Are you all done in there?" Eric looked at his client and then at his watch in surprise. He hadn't realized how long they had been in the small room. Betty looked at him with curiosity. "No, I guess we're done for the day," Eric said. "All right, Mr. Green," Elise teased playfully. "I'll see you tomorrow at the court. Did they teach you about this in law school?" "No, what happens there?" Eric asked. You're joking, right? I didn't even finish high school and I know about court, Betty said, her big blue eyes wide. Elise and I go way back, Eric smiled. She's just trying to be funny. If I ever needed help, Eric would be the second person I'd call, Elise said kindly to Betty. Who would be the first? Betty asked as she got up. My husband, Elise replied with a smile. Eric called Parker Johnson, a partner at his law firm, to update him on what had happened so far. After that, he spoke with his own paralegal, Jim Benson, to share what he had been working on. Then, he drove home. And here's Daddy! Anne smiled as Eric entered the living room of their new house. Daddy, Mom says you'll teach us how to dribble a basketball. She doesn't know how, Robbie, their oldest son, said. And what makes your mom think I know how to do that? Eric smiled. You do know how, Sammy said confidently. You know everything. So Eric rolled back outside to where Kenneth had set up a basketball hoop for the boys. Just give it a light tap, Eric advised. You're really trying to push it down hard enough to make it bounce back up, like. But how do you get it to go from here to there? Robbie asked. Eric had never played basketball from his wheelchair before, but with his two sons watching, he didn't want to let them down. From the window, Anne watched her husband and their two oldest boys. She held her phone in one hand to record, while she wiped the tears from her eyes with the other. That's my husband, she said. And that's my daddy, Evie chimed in. Eric was covered in sweat. Playing basketball was much tougher than he had expected. Still, Robbie and Sammy seemed to understand how to dribble down the driveway and shoot at the net. None of them made a basket, but they all tried their hardest. "PU3 smelly boys," Anne said as the sweaty group came into the house. After dinner, Eric helped the boys with their homework and then sent them off to take baths. He took his own shower, cleaned off the sweat, dried himself off, and then got back into his wheelchair. "Hey, big boy," his lovely wife smiled from their bed. He smiled back at her. She was wearing something special. "Hi, little girl," he said, watching her as she ran her fingers through her light blonde hair. "Want a little bit of my sweetness, honey?" Anne said playfully. "Of course I do," Eric replied and joined her in bed. "Or would you rather play with me?" Anne suggested with a grin as she adjusted her outfit. "Give me a kiss first," Eric said, and she leaned in for a warm kiss. They were both warm and happy when he finally got close to her. Anne covered her mouth to keep from making too much noise as they shared a tender moment together. But then she surprised him with something he was not ready for. She wanted to have another baby. "How are we going to do this?" he asked. "Are you suggesting we ask someone else to help?" "In our home? That's crazy!" Anne exclaimed. She looked at him, shocked. "Eric, this is our house. This is our family," she said, cuddling up to him. "I would never let anyone else be part of our home," she promised. He held back a response, understanding her feelings. The conversation with Betty went just as Eric had worried it would. They needed to be there at 8 o'clock, but Eric didn't meet his client until 10:17 that morning. It wasn't until nearly 1:40 p.m. that they were called in front of Judge Marie Robichaud. "And how does the defendant plead?" Judge Robichaud asked. "Not guilty. I request she be released on her own," Eric replied. "Your Honor, this is a serious case. The state plans to treat it as first degree," Sarah Guillory, the assistant district attorney, said. "Bail is set at $100,000, Judge Robichaud announced, banging her gavel and moving on to the next case. "First degree? But I didn't," Betty exclaimed. "She's just trying to make a point," Eric reassured her. "She was hoping to become the DA, and now she has something to prove." The first thing Eric did when he got to his office was check the website that Betty's husband, Butch, had set up. Betty had mentioned that Butch wanted a picture of her and took it with his phone. If she'd known it would be used for a website looking for clients, she would have never agreed. "Are those real?" Parker asked, peeking over Eric's shoulder at the computer screen. "As real as your hair," Eric replied. "What are you doing looking at that stuff?" Parker asked, his face turning red at Eric's remark about his hairpiece. "This is about our pro bono client," Eric explained. "No way." Parker leaned closer to the screen. "Her name is Sapphire? Wow, thought it was." "How many people do you know named Sapphire?" Eric interjected, closing the screen. "And what parents name their kids that?" "I had a girl in class named Ho," Parker chuckled. "Con Ho." "Anyway," Eric said, and updated Parker on everything that had happened so far. At home, Eric smiled when he saw Robbie and Sammy waiting outside with a basketball. Sammy was the first to score a basket and joyfully accepted a high five from his older brother along with a hug and kiss from their dad. "Hey, Mom!" Sammy shouted as they entered the house. "I know," Anne said, showing Sammy a video of his made basket on her phone. "Wasn't that amazing?" he cheered. Later that night, lying in bed, Anne told Eric that she had spoken to Kenneth and JC. "Evie is in pre-K, and Daddy said he doesn't have any work for a few days," Anne explained, "and Kenneth is okay with—" Eric started. "You need to call him," Anne replied. "He said he wouldn't do anything until you give the go-ahead." Eric dialed Kenneth's number on his phone, putting on a smile for Anne's sake. "Kenneth, how's it going?" Eric said when Kenneth picked up. The next morning, Eric drove his 3 kids to St. Richard's. They loved riding in Daddy's van. They'd press the button to open the sliding door and then press another button to fold out the lift. On Monday, Robbie would pull the lever to lower the lift. On Wednesday, Sammy got to pull the lever. And on Friday, Evie would take her turn. Feeling proud because their dad had the best van around, they'd walk into the school building. Right now, Eric's wife was driving to her sister's house. He gripped the steering wheel tightly. Suddenly, a horn blared and tires screeched, bringing Eric back to reality. He realized he had just run a red light with his kids in the van. "Wow, didn't see that," he chuckled, trying to shake off the thoughts of his wife. After dropping off his children, Eric passed by the Romero house. The yellow police tape still hung across the door. It was a small home, around 900 to 1,100 square feet, too small for a family of 6, soon to be 7, Eric thought. The lawn was overgrown, just like many neighbors' yards. 3 houses down, a Pontiac Fiero sat with weeds growing around it. Eric noticed many neighbors were home at 8:40 on a weekday, with older cars parked in front of their plain brick houses. He felt a twinge of sadness at one house where the owner took pride in his yard. The grass was neatly trimmed, the sidewalk was edged, and the windows sparkled in the sun. Eric arrived at the police station and sat in a small room, thankful for a client needing his attention. It gave him a break from worrying about things at home. Sapphire agreed to let Dean share a shower with her for $400. He could help wash her up, but then she jokingly said he would have to make her dirty again afterward. She laughed when Dean suggested they wait 3 days. At the depot, Butch turned in his log and chatted with a few guys waiting on their trucks. Then he got into his Z28, hoping it would start. After a few tries, it finally roared to life, and he drove home. "Hey," he said with a smile as he walked into the living room. Betty looked up from her vacuuming and nodded, acknowledging that she heard him. Betty finished vacuuming and turned off the noisy machine, feeling the silence finally return to the room. "Hey!" she called, pointing at a pile of bills on the kitchen table. Butch glanced at the bills, his face growing angry. "Why'd you open my mail?" he snapped. "Those were addressed to me." Betty raised her left hand, showing her wedding ring. "Because we're married. This affects both of us." Butch didn't have a response to that, so Betty pressed on. "Butch, you owe almost $40,000, she said, her voice calm but firm. "Yeah, well, I was laid off for a long time," he muttered. Butch told her about his friend Dean, and Betty, though irritated, sighed and nodded. "But tomorrow, you need to look into that CDU place in DeGard," she suggested. "What's CDU?" he asked, confused. "It's a place that helps you get off those pills," she explained. Butch's face turned red with anger. "First, you complain about our money problems, and now you want to add more bills? Are you serious?" "Butch, most of our money problems are because of the pills," Betty said, keeping her tone steady. Butch moved aggressively, but Betty quickly stepped out of reach, her reflexes sharp. Without hesitation, she picked up a butcher knife from the counter. "You lay a hand on me and you'll regret it," she warned, gripping the knife tightly. "I've put up with a lot, but I won't tolerate that." Later, Betty dressed up for her meeting with Dean, one of Butch's friends. She wore one of her nicer blouses and a pair of shorts, trying to prepare herself mentally. When the knock came at the door, she forced a smile. She felt her face flush when she saw Dean. Unlike the others she'd met before, she knew this young man. There was a strange connection she hadn't felt with anyone else. "Hi," Dean stammered, clearly nervous. Well, hey there, Betty said with a smile, trying to calm both herself and him. She gestured for him to come inside. Butch entered the room, making Dean even more uncomfortable. He looked ready to bolt, but Betty gently placed her hand on his arm to keep him from leaving. 400? Butch asked, holding out his hand. Dean nodded nervously and handed over 4 crisp bills. Thanks, Butch grunted, trying to act tough before leaving the room. Once he was gone, Betty turned back to Dean, keeping her voice soft. So my husband said you wanted to take a shower together? The awkwardness hung in the air, but Betty kept the mood light, trying to get through the uncomfortable moment. Betty was still fuming from the earlier incident. The memory of it lingered, but she pushed it aside as she tried to focus on the moment. Dean, standing nervously, stammered so much that Betty gently placed a finger on his lips to calm him. Then, surprising both of them, she leaned in and gave him a soft kiss. Just nod your head, okay? She said with a small smile. You want to take a shower with me, right? Dean nodded, clearly flustered, but Betty's warmth put him at ease. She giggled and led him by the hand to the small bathroom. Closing the door behind them, she lightly pressed him against it and kissed him again, trying to keep the mood light and simple. Then she started helping him undress, keeping things comfortable and calm. She smiled, complimenting him, though her words were gentle and casual. She noticed his shyness and reassured him with her kindness, keeping the atmosphere light-hearted. Now it's your turn to help me, Betty said, playfully holding her arms up. Dean unbuttoned her blouse, each button met with a small laugh from Betty, making him relax as he continued. Soon they were ready for the shower. You like the water hot? Betty asked as she adjusted the shower taps, keeping the conversation going with ease. The two of them stepped into the warm spray, and Betty kept things light and fun. They helped each other with the soap and sponge, taking turns scrubbing each other's backs and shoulders. Betty laughed and made playful comments, keeping the mood easygoing and relaxed. Here, let me get your back, Betty said, handing him the soap. Dean focused on cleaning her back, and Betty sighed contentedly as they continued, enjoying the simplicity of the moment. They washed each other's shoulders and legs, laughing occasionally. Betty eventually turned off the water, explaining, The water tank's small, and we're about to run out of hot water. The playful moment was soon over, and they both dried off. Dean, still a bit shy, asked if everything was real, marveling at the moment. Of course it's real, Betty said with a smile as they wrapped up their time together, leaving the complicated feelings behind for now. Betty sighed as Dean helped her rinse off in the shower. Why anyone would want to buy something this big, I'll never understand, Dean said with a laugh, trying to keep things lighthearted as he scrubbed her. Betty lifted her leg and placed it on the soap dish, offering instructions with a calm tone. Make sure everything's clean, she said, keeping things casual. After they finished rinsing, Betty whispered softly in Dean's ear while they dried off. I'm not what you think. My husband just needs money. She kissed him gently, hoping he would understand. Really, I'm not, she said again, seeking his reassurance. They gathered their things, and Betty carried his clothes to her bedroom. Butch, watching from a distance, grew both jealous and aroused. But he stayed where he was, silently observing. Dean, still nervous, kissed Betty softly, though unsure of himself. She smiled and reassured him, making the moment less tense. That was something, Betty said, trying to ease the awkwardness with a light-hearted comment. As Dean lay beside her, they shared a few more quiet moments, kissing softly. Dean, unsure of what to say, stayed close, and Betty kept the conversation light and gentle. Butch, still watching from afar, clenched his fists, feeling a mix of emotions. He didn't know how to react, but he remained still, not wanting to confront the situation head-on. The night ended quietly, with everyone feeling the tension in the air, but no one willing to push it any further. The silence between them spoke volumes, but it was clear that things had changed. Betty was clearly enjoying herself, much more than Butch had expected. Through the glass, Butch could hear her muffled voice calling out, "Oh, sugar!" as Dean continued. He had grown used to seeing Betty with a bored expression whenever his other friends were involved. It was always about the money for her, and Butch found some satisfaction in knowing she wasn't enjoying it. But this time was different. Betty seemed to be genuinely enjoying herself, and that made Butch uneasy. As Dean continued, Betty began to understand why so many people seemed to crave this connection. She let out a cry as she experienced something new, something intense. When it was over, they lay together, breathing heavily. Betty hugged Dean, holding him close, not wanting to let go. She made a small sound of disappointment as he finally pulled away. Butch, watching from a distance, couldn't bear it anymore. His jealousy boiled over, especially as Betty asked Dean, jokingly, if he planned to keep going. Butch could see the conflict in Dean's eyes. He hesitated, not wanting to continue, but at the same time the situation had taken its own course. Betty winced, clearly in discomfort, but she tried to keep things light. She encouraged Dean, even though it was clear she wasn't enjoying it as much anymore. As time passed, the moment came to an end. Dean sat back, reaching for a small sketch pad. He began drawing Betty as she lay quietly on the bed, her hair tousled from everything that had happened. Betty, her voice shaky, asked, "What are you doing?" Drawing you," Dean stammered, concentrating on his sketch. He completed the drawing, capturing her as she was, and handed it to her with a small, shy smile. He even scribbled his phone number on the back, though he knew she probably wouldn't call. Afterward, Dean sat and sketched Betty from his imagination, picturing her in a calmer, more peaceful light. He did not notice the visible signs of her discomfort. He saw a lovely young woman who needed kindness and care. He handed Betty the first drawing. "Oh, is this really me?" Betty asked as he started to get dressed. "No," he replied, and showed her the second sketch. "Wow," she exclaimed, amazed by what he had created. She placed the small drawing on the nightstand and got out of bed. She felt a twinge of discomfort as she moved. "I hurt you," Dean said softly. "I am sorry." "Hey, it's okay," she smiled, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Sometimes it can be tough, right?" She kissed him again gently, playfully inviting him to respond. "Thanks. I hope to see you again," she said as Dean left the room. A moment later, Betty heard the front door close. She lay back on the bed, waiting for her husband to come home like he usually did after she had been with one of his friends. But he never came, and Betty drifted off to sleep while she waited. "Need you to use this jar," Butch said a few days later. "Butch, I don't feel well," Betty complained, feeling uncomfortable due to her upcoming period. "Come on, Betty, I really need this right now," Butch shouted. "This trip could take me all the way to Maine, and it's important." "Fine, but you can't watch," Betty shot back, grabbing the jar. She went to the bathroom and used the jar. When she noticed her panties, she was relieved. If her period had started, it meant the discomfort wouldn't last much longer. She found a pad, took care of herself, washed her hands, and returned to where Butch was waiting. "There, but I really think you should look into that clinic," she insisted. Butch left the next morning, and Betty felt a sense of relief. As she changed the sheets on the bed in the other room, she glanced at the drawing Dean had left for her. There was something captivating about it, even though it captured a moment that might remind her of discomfort. "Dean Begnaud," she read aloud, noticing the phone number on the back. She set the drawing down and continued with her chores. At the depot, Pops called to arrange a pickup for Butch's sample, and the lab sent someone over. Butch completed his first run to Jackson, Mississippi, and then continued to Clarkston, Tennessee. A few days later, her period winding down, Betty put fresh sheets on the bed and looked at the drawing again. She took out her new cell phone. She had used some of the money her mother gave her when she left Arkansas. Butch didn't even know she had it. "Hey, Sugar, what are you doing?" she cheerfully asked when Dean answered. "Sugar, Sugar, stop," she said firmly. Dean was stuttering so badly that she couldn't understand him. "Sugar, do you know how to text?" "Yes," he replied. She giggled at his message. "Okay, Sugar, let's do that," she said before hanging up. They exchanged texts, and Betty smiled happily. Dean was kind, smart, and sweet. He seemed really into her. They made plans to meet later after his classes ended. At the depot, Pops answered the ringing phone. "Hey, Pops, this is Jack from the lab," said Jack Anthony. "Jack, are you still ugly?" Pops joked. "Yeah, are you still bald?" Jack replied. "My head is so smooth it feels like your mom's," Pops laughed. "That's smooth," Jack chuckled. "Hey, Pops, I checked this sample. You thought it was a male, right?" Sam, yeah, we picked him up about 4 months ago, Pop said. Why do you ask? You need to bring him in again, Jack replied. This sample had traces of medication and some other material in it. That little guy, Pops said angrily. I bet he had his wife help him out. While Pops was using GPS to find Butch, who wasn't answering his phone or texts, Betty was excitedly getting ready for their date. As his wife put on the pretty skirt and soft sweater he had bought her, Butch was asleep in the back of the truck at a truck stop. Hi! Oh my gosh, you look even better than I remember. Hi, sugar, where are we going? Betty asked as she opened the door to a smiling Dean. Barbecue, he stuttered. Ooh, great, I love barbecue, Betty said. He drove her to Cowboy's BBQ and pointed out there were so many different flavors to try. Caramel apple? Oh, I bet that's delicious, Betty said, looking at the flavors. Yes, it really is. My favorite is mocha, their waitress mentioned. Do you know what you want, or do you need more time? They ordered, with Betty choosing the brisket platter and caramel apple malt. Dean pointed to what he wanted, feeling too shy to speak. From the depot, Pops called their office in Pennsylvania. The dispatcher sent a crew member to the truck stop where Butch was waking up from his deep sleep. He walked into the truck stop, found an empty booth, and sat down, feeling very heavy and tired. While he pushed the scrambled eggs around on his plate, Betty and Dean were getting back into Dean's car. You might think I'm crazy, Betty teased Dean. Why's that? Dean smiled at her. 'Cause I forgot my underwear, Betty said playfully. That's a naughty move, Dean exclaimed, and they both laughed. She leaned over the console and kissed him. I love you, she said with sincerity and kissed him again. They drove back to her house and she pulled him inside. Don't, she said as he leaned in. I'm just getting back from my period. It's not the best time. They lay on the bed, sharing kisses and hugs, feeling happy together. At the truck stop, Butch looked up as a big man shouted, Romero? Is anyone named Romero here? Eric rolled out of the police department and smiled. His wife had sent him a text asking if he wanted to meet for lunch. Sounds good, he replied. Where? She mentioned a place called Tommy's Po' Boys, and he told her he would be there soon. She arrived dressed in fitted jeans and a sweater, catching the eye of many patrons as she greeted Eric with a kiss. Hope you wanted catfish. I got you a large with ketchup, she said cheerfully as he joined her at the table. Their order was called, and Anne brought the tray to the table and they sat down to eat. Love you. See you when you get home, she said happily. Wait a minute. Where's little Eric? Eric asked. Oh, JC has him. He and Kevin were still napping when I was leaving, Anne replied. Okay, that's a relief, Eric said, feeling better. You didn't say much during lunch, did you? Anne joked. Hey, I was hungry, Eric laughed. Food comes first. Typical guy, honestly, Anne laughed, kissed him again, and left, leaving Eric to tidy up. As he cleaned the table, he thought about a troubling moment but quickly pushed it aside while picking up their leftover wrappers and cups. He drove to the office to file a stay of foreclosure for a client, then reviewed a divorce application with another client. The client looked uncomfortable around Eric, and he thought about using his situation to defend himself, but instead gave the client a firm look. Mr. Madison, I was a police officer who was shot while working, he said sharply. My condition is not contagious. Is there another lawyer I can talk to? The man shouted. Not here, Eric replied sharply. Have a nice day, the man said angrily, grabbed his hat and coat and left in a hurry. What a jerk, Jim, Eric's assistant said. Make sure we charge that guy for a full hour, Eric said as he collected all the papers they had prepared. When he got home, he was met with a lovely meal and 3.5 kids who wanted his attention. Little Eric didn't care which parent held him, just that someone did. Neither Eric nor Anne seemed too interested in anything special at bedtime, so they exchanged a kiss and went to sleep. On Monday, Eric drove to the Bender Police Department again and met with Betty Romero. The bandage on her hand was off, and he could see the staples holding her cut together. Did that hurt? He asked, pointing to her hand. Yeah, but I had to take the dumb bandage off, she said. It was too tricky to go to the bathroom with it on. She turned red and looked away. I mean, it's hard to wipe with one hand, she said quietly. I understand, he replied. Now, we were talking about Cowboy's barbecue, right? You have to try their caramel apple malt. It's amazing, she smiled softly. Meanwhile, a big man drove a truck back toward Bender, Louisiana. He didn't have a name. When Butch had asked him what it was, the man said Butch didn't need to know. "You're the reason we have all these rules and regulations," the man said angrily. "It's bad enough we have unions breathing down our necks, but—" "Hey, can we not talk?" Butch snapped, feeling tired of the man's anger. He was also feeling unwell. He was supposed to get something at the truck stop, but was stopped before he could. "You better pray I don't pull over and take matters into my own hands," the man warned. They arrived at a truck stop outside Monroe, Louisiana. Butch followed the man inside and sat down across from him. "Go sit anywhere else," the man ordered. "I don't want anyone thinking we know each other." "We don't," Butch grumbled. Feeling suddenly hungry, Butch ordered his food and enjoyed it. "Sorry, sir, but do you have another card?" the waitress asked, holding out Butch's card. This one was declined. Butch tried 2 more cards, but they were denied too. The truck stop manager stepped outside. "Here you go," Butch said, handing the woman a $100 bill. "Do you have anything smaller?" the manager asked. "Keep the change," Butch replied sharply. "We're already running late, Romero. Let's move." "You can't just waste my money," Butch protested. "Why not? You're wasting it on unnecessary things," the manager shot back. They left, with Butch grumbling until the manager turned and slapped him hard. Butch felt blood in his mouth. 5 hours later, they arrived at the Bender depot, and Butch was handed some papers to sign. "What if I refuse to sign?" he asked angrily. "You should be glad I'm letting you not sign them," Pops grinned. Butch tried to get up. "Then I just have to call the police to pick you up," Pops said. "Those papers are important. You lied and put our property and customers in danger. Go ahead, Romero. Don't sign them if you want." While Butch was busy with the paperwork, Betty was in another room with Dean, enjoying their time together and feeling a sense of control. "Please," he begged. "What's wrong?" Betty teased, happy to feel powerful for once. She then sat closer to him, sharing an intimate moment. "I care about you," she said before they continued sharing their connection. Meanwhile, Butch needed a jump for his car. When it finally started, he didn't thank Pops but drove off quickly. In Betty's room, Dean was focused on her when Butch suddenly yelled from the doorway. "Butch!" Betty gasped, shocked. Dean reacted in confusion. Butch, filled with anger, punched Dean in frustration. "No!" Betty shouted as she grabbed a lamp. "I'll take care of this!" Butch yelled, hitting Dean again. Betty threw the lamp, which missed Butch and broke the mirror. "Watch it or you'll regret this!" Butch shouted, getting closer to Dean. In a rush, Betty found a piece of the broken mirror and defended herself. Butch, shocked by her reaction, struggled and accidentally hurt himself in the process. Eric asked Ann to join him as he met with his client. Ann took Eric's credit card and drove to the bargain bin. "You already have enough maternity clothes. You don't need to find anything else there," he called after her, smiling as she laughed. "Are you having a baby?" Betty asked, her big eyes shining. "Yes, this will be our 5th child," Eric said with a smile. "Mr. Eric, when I grow up, I want to have 5 or 6 kids," Betty said. "Dean has been here 6 times. He even brought me a caramel apple malt and an orange creamsicle." "He's a fine young man," Eric agreed. "I met him at the deposition." The trial started in late May. The process of choosing the jury was tough. Sarah rejected almost every juror Eric approved. In the end, they gathered 12 jurors with 4 extras. Eric knew he had to agree with Ann's clothing choices. There was no way to hide Betty's shape, so Ann didn't try. Instead, she picked soft colors that didn't draw too much attention to her. She also avoided overly stylish outfits. This jury needed to focus and not be distracted by anything flashy. If Betty thought the clothes were too plain for her, she didn't show it. Instead, she enjoyed the long skirts, jackets, and simple blouses. Eric also had Ann and several colleagues from Johnson, Johnson, and Lambert surprise Betty with a party for her 19th birthday at the back of the courtroom at the end of the 3rd day of the trial. "Make a wish," Ann said as the candles lit up. "I wish this trial would be over," Betty said with a laugh as she tried to blow out the candles. "Oh my, what flavor is this?" she asked while tasting the cake. "Caramel apple," Ann replied. "Oh, Miss Ann, I love you," Betty said with tears of joy. Eric glanced around the courtroom. Most of the people were smiling as they celebrated Betty's birthday, but the foreman of the jury was glaring at them. When he noticed Eric looking, he quickly tried to hide his anger, but Eric had already caught his expression. Jim, juror number 4, Eric whispered to his paralegal. Michael Norman, Jim said a moment later. Keep an eye on him, Eric instructed. The next morning, before Sarah could begin asking questions of Sergeant Darren Richards, the officer who had made the arrest, Eric called for a private meeting. He showed Judge Jesse Johnson and Sarah Guillory that Michael Norman's mother and Butch Romero's mother were sisters, making Michael and Butch cousins. If you check his mother's Facebook page, you'll see many pictures of them as kids, Eric explained. Bailiff, please take juror number 4, Michael Norman, out, Judge Johnson ordered. Suddenly, Michael yelled at Betty, I hope they find you guilty. I hope you get what you deserve. Your Honor, Eric said, addressing the judge. I'm on it, Counselor, the judge replied. The judge looked over the courtroom, addressing the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, you are excused with the court's thanks. I'm declaring a mistrial. Counselors, I want new trial papers filed no later than next Tuesday. Your Honor, in the meantime, my client has been a model prisoner. I request she be released on her own recognizance, Eric said. Counselor? Judge Johnson asked, turning to Sarah. She can put her house up as bail, Sarah replied with a shrug. Eric smiled as he wheeled over to Betty, who sat in disbelief at the buzzing courtroom. Do you need anything from the jail? He asked. Just the clothes you got me, Betty replied, still in awe. We'll pick those up. Why don't you go home and give Dean a call? Eric suggested. I'm free? Betty asked, her voice trembling with emotion. We still have to go to trial, Miss Romero. You can't leave Louisiana, Eric cautioned. Betty hugged him tightly. I think you're an angel, Mr. Eric. Anne, approaching from behind, smiled and added, I think so too. Meanwhile, Dean was sitting in his art history class when his phone chimed in his backpack. Mr. Begnaud, go ahead and answer that, the instructor said dryly. Sorry, Dean mumbled, pulling out his phone. His eyes widened as he read the text. Holy cow, he exclaimed, jumping up and grabbing his things without saying another word. He rushed out of the room, leaving the instructor to continue the lecture, chuckling at the sudden departure. And because of all those pills he was taking, Betty began to explain, but was reminded by Judge Johnson to speak louder. She cleared her throat and repeated, because of all those pills, he had trouble, with getting an erection. Eric asked, and whose idea was it for you to become involved in prostitution? Butch's, Betty whispered, prompting another reminder from the judge to speak up. It was Butch's idea. Me? I didn't care. I hadn't seen another man in that way. Another what? Eric asked, holding back a smile. A man's. Down there, Betty clarified. Some of the jurors, especially a couple of the women, smiled, and a man in the jury even chuckled. Eric then presented evidence, a receipt from Paul Robichaux for the installation of a two-way mirror, followed by photos of the broken mirror. He also introduced a web page warning the jury that the language used was crude. Betty's tone shifted when she spoke of Dean. And I learned something. It's not Begnaud, it's pronounced Baigno. The D? It's silent. Sarah tried her best to rattle Betty on the stand, causing Betty to tear up a few times, but in the end, her story remained consistent. Some members of the jury were glaring at Sarah when she finally said she had no more questions. Sarah's closing statement felt long, and many jury members seemed uninterested as she spoke about a woman who was cold and calculating. This woman was accused of trapping a man because of a big life insurance policy, and when it seemed like she couldn't benefit from it, she harmed him. Life insurance? Betty asked Eric. Judge Johnson hit his gavel, reminding everyone to stay quiet during the closing statements. Eric kept his remarks brief. He talked about the importance of feeling loved and needed. My wife and I are expecting another baby, he said. Is it because we keep forgetting precautions? He let the laughter fade away. No, it's because we love each other completely and want to share that love. We already have 3 wonderful boys. I can't believe how fast they're growing up. My son Robbie is going to 5th grade, and Sammy is moving up to 4th. Our little girl is starting kindergarten. He paused, looking down for a moment before glancing back at the jurors. Eric Jr. is having some trouble with potty training, but when we hug and kiss our kids, it feels like holding our love in our arms. He turned to Betty, pointing at her. And that's what this woman was seeking, a love to share, not one to sell. But what did she discover when she met Butch Romero? He asked, looking back at the jury. Anne, Eric, and Betty had just ordered at Sweet Peas when Jim texted Eric that the jury was returning. Sorry, we have to go, Anne told the woman in charge of the restaurant. It's all right, the woman smiled. Someone else will enjoy it. Does it mean something good or bad that they're back so quickly? Anne asked Eric as he drove them to the courthouse. Yeah, Mr. Eric, what does that mean? Betty wondered. We'll know soon, Eric replied, trying to put on a brave face. Just before going into the courtroom, Anne hugged Betty tightly. Eric didn't just hear the foreperson say, not guilty. He felt it deeply. The woman at Sweet Peas smiled as they walked in. Tell people they have to try the stuffed pork chop today, she joked, as she went to take their drink orders. Are you really free? Dean excitedly asked as he burst into the small restaurant. I'm really, really free, Betty laughed and hugged him. The money spent on their food was forgotten. Betty and Dean simply enjoyed each other's company throughout the meal. That night, in bed, Anne cuddled up to her husband as best she could with her growing belly. That's my husband, she said enthusiastically. That's my man. She kissed him and gazed into his eyes. And after this baby? She asked. Yeah, he replied. That's it. I'm making sure I can't have more kids. I'm closing this place down, she said. Oh, okay, he replied. Are you okay with that? She asked. Yeah, it's your choice, he agreed. You're the one who has to deal with feeling uncomfortable. She laughed and playfully tapped him. I don't feel uncomfortable, but we've never discussed it. Do you want more kids? Anne asked. No, I think 5 is enough, Eric said. Honestly, we might need to find a way to manage their food intake. She chuckled and turned over, teasingly nudging him with her backside. My backside is not big, she insisted. Yes, dear, you're right. Whatever you say, Eric said before laughing when she playfully hit him with her pillow. While Anne and Eric were getting ready for bed, Betty and Dean were in his apartment, enjoying each other's company. Dean, how many kids do you want? Betty asked. Maybe 5 or 6, he said shyly. Well, we won't have any if you keep choosing the wrong way, she laughed. Thanks for watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe to Infidelity Plus to stay updated with more captivating tales of infidelity and payback. Turn on notifications so you're the first to see our latest content.